Hello and welcome to Six Part. Today I'm gonna start a new series. What if Deku got the Omnitrix Part 1? If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
Peculiarities. Since their abrupt rebellion, humans have placed a great deal of importance on that one word. Why are they important? Because, depending on who you ask, they have altered the world, both positively and negatively. The Meta Liberation Army referred to quirks as a meta ability, which is a unique, superhuman skill that a person can have. Most quirks are specific to the person who possesses them and fall into one of several categories, each of which has its own set of skills and abilities. Today, just over 200 years ago, they made their appearance, forever altering the course of history. For those who had one anyway, the world was quick to not take this gift for granted, even though the cause was unknown. Only 80% of the world's population currently possesses quirks in all nations. The majority of them come from Japan and the United States, both of which continue to have a very high percentage of quirked people. Selective breeding programs were initially responsible for creating more effective quirks for every new generation. These programs are essentially non-existent today since society no longer needs them and prefers to let people make their own decisions. This was a mixed blessing, though. Alongside the growth of these new abilities came the desire to surpass others. These powers were available to everyone, even criminals. They became even more dangerous than before with their newfound abilities, joining the villains, a natural threat to the world. These villains also created a need for heroes at the same time. They were all different sizes and shapes, and they all used their gifts for the good of everyone. Some were armed criminals who engaged in direct combat with more violent villains. Others used their talents to actively assist others with their peculiarities, whether in the medical or technological fields. Some people just used them to make ends meet while working their regular jobs. But the people who were really impacted were those who had never accomplished a quirk. The remaining 20% were just regular people with nothing in common with quirked people. Since most of them had no idea what would happen if they encountered one or if they attacked, fear naturally began to creep in. They didn't change like them, and they didn't have their powers. Only a small percentage of people have not changed their opinions about them, and most people are still cautious of them even after 200 years. However, this did not imply that things were simple. Quirks were initially viewed as a disease because some people had abnormalities, and this was made worse by the danger they posed. They were eventually placed in camps to see if they were secure enough to be accepted into society. There wasn't a glimmer of hope against villains until the first heroes emerged from the darkness. Their world had changed over the next few months to resemble a comic book, something they had only ever imagined in their dreams, but now it was in front of them. Now, the world goes on without realizing how drastically it will change over the next few years. Musutafu, Japan, TB Beta Testing Grounds, UA University. The UA Since University produced the most powerful and well-known heroes of our time, it was without a doubt the best hero school in the world. But none seemed to be able to compete with All Might, the world's greatest hero and symbol of hope. He is the world's greatest example of heroism, teaching both young and old what it means to be a hero. But even with all the money in the world, you couldn't just walk in. To join, you had to demonstrate the traits of a hero. Additionally, there was a brief written test to determine your familiarity with the fundamentals of education. This was still a university, after all. The combat test followed the written exam. The combat test wasn't too difficult. To earn a specific number of points, destroy specific robots. You receive a point for hitting the off switch on the back if you were unable to destroy one. They had to put in their best effort to defeat robots in order to gain entry into UA because the minimum score was 50. College. Additionally, attacking someone else would result in instant disqualification from the test and, consequently, from the school. Before the test began, each of them received a wristwatch that tracked their points. For anyone who wasn't a jackass or just plain dumb, it was really easy. As a result, the group of future students waited in a room with a wide gate that led directly into the mock city where they would be taking the test. The young adults displayed a wide range of emotions. As they were mentally preparing for the impending test, they felt a lot of emotions, including pride, fear, uncertainty, and confidence. Kyoka Jiro was one such individual, who felt even more anxious and unsure. Although the test was a little more difficult than she had anticipated, she was certain that she would pass. She wasn't sure she could handle this combat test, though. With her quirk, anyway. A set of headphone jacks dangling from her earlobes was called an earphone jack. Because of it, she was able to hear quite well, picking up even the smallest sounds and hearing up to several meters around her. Taking down the robots would be very simple because she had discovered that she could easily channel the sound of her heartbeat through them in the form of a violent vibration attack. But because of her sensitive hearing, she was also exposed to louder noises much more easily, which made it difficult for the young girl to concentrate at all, like it is now. Assholes. Is it not possible for them to stop talking for a few minutes? As she was made to listen to the group around her, Jiro thought to herself. One of them was an asshole who was casually releasing mini explosions from his palms, which, if they were normal, might as well have been next to her ears. Damn it, with the others shouting and thrashing the robots while my hands explode, how am I ever going to score a point? In all honesty, it was a little unfair, especially since she had genuinely hoped to enroll in UA. Although there were other locations, UA was the greatest for a reason, and it also happened to be close to her house. She was now uncertain about how she would handle the robots if she simply collapsed with her ears bleeding. But she was stabbed in the shoulder before she could continue to gripe to herself. With her earphone jacks ready to poke at whoever was touching her, she instinctively turned to face the source. It was a boy about her age, maybe 18 or 19, who stood a good 6.0 feet tall, had short, spiky black hair, fair rosy skin, and emerald green eyes. He was also somewhat built. Not as much as All Might, but not nearly as thin as a man who could be described as frail. She couldn't help but notice the watch on his wrist, even though he was dressed in a light blue gym suit like the others. It appeared to be a typical black and gray wristwatch at first glance, but the faceplate featured a grayed-out hourglass symbol with a green button. Why bring it here? It certainly looked like something fancy. People, you're right. The man raised his hand to reveal an imprint on it and said, I don't want to bother you, but your earphones? Anyway, they're going a bit haywire and one of them kinda jabbed me. Wait. Shit. Jiro lowered her earphones and cursed herself. Great, she had hit someone with her quirk, in addition to inadvertently jabbing it around. Sorry dude, I'm a little nervous about this and... Never mind, are you okay? To her relief, he waved it off as if it were nothing and said, oh yeah, I'm fine. Just a little worried about you. Hurting someone who might not have deserved it was the last thing she wanted to do. Being the key word, perhaps. So, I'm Rukido. Rukido Sato. Reminding herself that she had technically attacked him, Jiro thought, I don't remember asking for his name. But maybe he's just being nice. Fine, Kyoka Jiro. With a slight smile, Rukido said, nice to meet you, Kyoka. She exclaimed, K Kyoka, with obvious embarrassment and a hint of rage. Oh right, sorry about that. I'm from America and it's more common to call people by their first name where I'm from rather than last. He offered an apology. She exhaled, becoming a little more composed after realizing she might have overreacted. Jiro turned away and fell silent once more, saying, it's fine. You said that you're nervous? Come on, I'm a little impatient, Jiro thought. But as she turned to face him, she composed herself again. Yeah. I mean, isn't everyone? Regarding the boy who was launching mini explosions, Rukido remarked, probably. Definitely not Boom Boom Boy over there. He looks like he's ready to kill anybody that gets too close. Pretty sure he blew off his own dick by accident with how angry he looks. Jiro covered her mouth to hold back her laughter, but she couldn't help but snort. Hey, laughing. That's good. Easily a great way to get rid of stress, take my word for it. Rukido replied with pride. He spoke again as she finished. So, how do you feel now? Jiro said, just a bit better. Thanks. Jiro let out a sigh and Rukido said, anytime, but what have you worried about? She didn't want anyone else to hear her weakness, so she kept quiet about it. My quirk gives me super hearing, and as you imagine, being in a room with a bunch of destructive people and ready to bash in some robot heads isn't really the best thing for me. I can handle the robots just fine, I know that, but it's gonna be a pain in the ass having to deal with all of that right next to me. Rukido said, would you mind some advice? According to Jiro, feel free. If nothing else, it wouldn't hurt. He went on to give a basic overview of what would happen. All of these people, as soon as they're given the go-ahead, they'll rush out, pushing and shoving one another while running in a direct straight line to destroy as many as rust buckets as they can without thinking things through. For you, I say take a right and avoid them altogether to deal with the targets on that side. UA would be smart enough to use up all the space of the fake city in order to give everyone a fighting chance. In actuality, that was a smart idea. However, Jiro automatically harbored some misgivings. For example, if this was a means of eliminating individuals who posed a risk or were simply easy pickings, and if you're wrong. He shrugged and said, I doubt it, but I'll head with you. Jiro remarked, you're taking this pretty easily. Rukido said, what can I say? I'm confident. The gates abruptly opened and a bell rang before she could reply. They immediately made a sharp right into the city, dragging Jiro through the bewildered and motionless crowd before he could react. Huh? Why are they leaving? Hey, they're so gonna get in trouble. Present Mike yelled jokingly over the PA. What are you waiting for? There are no countdowns in a real fight. Get moving. Needless to say, as they searched for their target, all of the students hurried out in a panic. They all pushed each other aside as they ran into the same spot, as was to be expected. Jiro and Rukido, meanwhile, were sufficiently distant to be visible as a few robots strolled by. Fear me. I am a villain. As she effortlessly poked her jacks straight into one of the machines, Jiro remarked, well, it looks like you were right. Then she had used her heartbeat to send a sound wave into it, instantly turning it off. Hey. Thanks, Sato. He scratched his cheek and said, please, call me Rukido. He could only smile before he spoke, lifting his arm. I'll leave you to deal with them. I'm heading towards the edge of the city. Confused, Jiro questioned, huh? Why? Both of them could find plenty of machines nearby. Rukido grinned broadly and said, figure I'd spread out the herd. Besides, you're more than enough to handle the rust buckets. As she watched him push a tiny button on his watch, she felt a slight heat rise in her face. Rukido pressed down on the faceplate, which popped up and was immediately surrounded by a dazzling green light. Jiro opened her eyes as it faded, seeing nothing but a trail of dust heading out of the area. All right, he's fantastic. Observation Room, University of Arizona. The UA staff. When it came to new students joining their school, they took their jobs very seriously. They ensure that anyone who signs up is giving it their all while they're here, whether it be through courses or heroics. In order to comprehend what they would be dealing with for the next 4 years, they had to keep an eye on their future pupils while they took the combat exam. Mike said to his longtime friend, these listeners are something special, right Aizawa? The obnoxious teacher pouted when he was immediately ignored. Ah, are you still mad I caught you? Glancing at the pair, Midnight asked with a broad smile, oh, caught him doing what exactly? Mike started to say, oh well he was practic ga. But Aizawa interrupted him by slamming a fist into his face. Red eyes glaring into present Mike's skull, Aizawa threatened, say a word and I will strangle you. Mike screamed, yeesh. Calm down will ya? But stopped when Aizawa lifted his fist once more, sorry. Midnight shook her head at their antics and sighed, oh boys. Then a cheeky grin appeared on her face. Still, Mike is right. Just looking at those youthful students all makes me a bit hot and bothered. Is trying to remove life's previous 5 seconds. Failure to erase. Never wanting to hear those words again, Aizawa thought, damn it. A new employee, Toshinori Yagi specifically, remarked, well, they certainly are something to look at. But when he said that, his feeble smile appeared forced. I trust you adjusted well, Mr. Yagi? Nezu said, smiling knowingly as he sat beside the man. Yagi looked at the screen and remarked, yes, it has been a most welcoming experience. He had a guidebook in his pocket for a reason, even though he wasn't sure if he could succeed as a teacher. In any case, he was going to require it for a specific greenet. Perhaps I ought to have offered young Midoriya some additional guidance on how to manage his power, but I believe I performed adequately. I believe. Yelling, smash, and clenching your butt checks seemed like a good way to activate a superpower. Vald King, who was looking for anyone he wanted for his homeroom class, stated, we should hope so. I rather not let the students get the wrong idea about how they'll be treated here. He looked over at Powerloader. These things are safe, right Higari? In an interesting tone, Powerloader remarked, about as safe when you ask every other time, Con. When it came to the safety of the children taking the tests, Vlad was always a little pushy, especially for his upcoming class. The only thing that should really threaten these kids is either overwhelming numbers, which I doubt will be an issue, and the zero-pointer. Angrily, Aizawa remarked, TCH, you're going too easy on them. As he watched an update come up on his screen, Powerloader fell silent. You're talking as if these kids have any training at all. They'll still have to work in order to destroy enough of my machines before... What? Mike said, something wrong? Powerloader remarked, someone just annihilated 50 of my robots. Huh? That's not something to... Powerloader stunned the majority of his employees, all but one smiling Nezu, by saying, at the same time, groups on different streets and on the buildings. Within barely 10 seconds. I need to see this. TB Beta 4 testing grounds, UA University. The blur raced past, then came to a halt, destroying another row of fictitious villains. It was a semi-armored velociraptor of some sort, with a long black tail with white stripes, a black conoid helmet with a blue visor, and black orbs on his feet. It appeared to be dressed in a skin-tight black jumpsuit with a green hourglass on its chest and a white stripe running the length of it. As it spoke, its visor opened to reveal a blue face with green eyes and black lines running across it. Well, that was easy so far. Still, better make sure I got enough points. With his visor down, he returned to his previous form as a black and blue haze around the testing arena's perimeter. Observation space. When they saw that the blur wasn't just a blur, they weren't sure what to say. Indeed, it wasn't odd. They had many humanoid pupils whose appearances were altered by their quirks. But in none of the testing rooms did they ever see this one. What? Who is that? After witnessing the nearly impossible, nobody had much to say orally, so the question remained unanswered. Principal Nezu is the exception. He merely chuckled. At the student's performance, the principal clapped his hands and laughed, saying, "Oh my, what a wonderful show he's putting on." "You know this student?" Yagi inquired alarmingly, if only because Nezu's laughter was so frightful. With an unwavering smile, Nezu said, "Rukido Sato, a grandson of an old friend of mine." Cementos said, should we be concerned? To midnight. The R-rated hero said, "Probably," and then turned to face the other testing facilities. "He's absolutely thrashing everyone else's scores though." The other faculty members slowly craned their heads over to the mouse as Nezu exclaimed, "Well, I do believe it to be a good time to release the 0-pointers. Are you sure? It's a bit early. Trial through adversity, my fellow teachers, present Mike, if you would be so kind." After giving the principal a quick glare, Aizawa turned to face present Mike and screamed to stop when he noticed the man's hand had already pressed the button. Mike simply made fun of his friend. "What? He scares me more than you do." TB Beta 4 testing grounds. Jiro knew she received a respectable number of points, but she wasn't sure how she was doing. All she wanted was to be free of too many people and to have defeated more than enough robots before someone like Boom Boom Boy appeared. She didn't intend to become deaf. Deactivating another robot, she proceeded to ensure she scored enough points before being stopped in her tracks by a loud explosion. Large buildings started to collapse, and soon the screams were filled with fear. She gulped as she turned around, fear rising inside her. It was an absurdly large robot that was using its enormous arms to, lightly, attack other prospective students. She quickly became one of the many people fleeing from the Machanla beast. However, the foundation of other buildings started to collapse around them and in her direction due to the extent of the damage down around them and the robot trembling entire streets. She didn't even have time to react because a black and blur quickly zipped past the group she was running with, just as a large section of the building was about to collapse on them. The next thing she knew, something was carrying her and she was traveling at breakneck speed. She was dropped on her feet alongside other students, who appeared equally as shocked and perplexed, and it hardly lasted a second. The big mech was currently en route, but they were only a little farther from the 0-pointers. Before they knew it, the blur had halted in front of them and was staring at them through its visor. The speedy lizard turned away from them and gave the order, "Stay back and leave this to me." A familiar green flash engulfed him, and he raised his claw and struck it. "Wait, Rukido?" Jiro called in disbelief as the light went out. It was replaced by something completely different. There was a tall, pale green crystal creature now, with a sharp head, green eyes, and 2 small shards from his chest in addition to 4 sharp ones on his back. He seemed to be dressed in a black, sleeveless jumpsuit with the same hourglass symbol on the left side of his chest and green lines running down his legs. "Diamond Head!" he cried when he first appeared. He glared up at the machine, and the students could only stare in awe at the new creature. "Okay, you pile of scrap, get ready for me." Observation room. Except for Nezu's laughter, the room was filled with stunned silence. Although transformation quirks were not uncommon, they had never undergone such a significant transformation. Midnight questioned, What kind of quirk is that?" "Giddy," Nezu exclaimed. "I'll be sure to inform you as soon as the test is over with." Eraserhead glared at him, fully aware that he would not like what he was about to hear. But for the time being, they needed to see how this would turn out. TB Beta 4 testing grounds. A wave of crystals formed beneath Diamond Head and rose into the air as he extended his hands. As he got closer and closer to the robot's location, he was soon making diamonds to enable him to slide over the ground once he was high enough. As soon as it saw him, it swung its arm in an attempt to knock him back. But it missed, and Diamond Head landed on its arm while its arm was held in place by a pillar of solid crystals. He extended his hands and then shifted them, launching crystal shards at its head, which exploded upon impact. When the zero-pointer attempted to seize the crystal user, Diamond Head slid past the arm and covered it with crystals. He made another pillar of crystals to help him lunge at the head, and as soon as he reached its shoulder, his arms changed into sharp blades. He immediately went straight inside it, piercing through its head. Initially stumbling, the zero-pointer's head exploded and its body, still supported by the crystal pillar, fell to its knees. As Diamond Head landed on the ground before them, unharmed by the blast, the students could only watch in awe and shock. Over the PA, President Mike yelled, "The test is over, good job everybody." Before he slapped the hourglass symbol and was surrounded by another light, he brushed himself off and ignored the stares he was receiving. A grin spread across Rukido's face, replacing it, and that, as they say, is that. "Yo, dude." Jiro ran up to Rukido, who jumped with excitement. He laughed a little and she punched him in the arm. "Thanks for saving me from getting crushed." As she stiffened a chuckle, Rukido joked, "All in a day's work, ma'am." "Wow. Never call me ma'am again. Done. Observation room." Aizawa asked Nezu, who was beaming maniacally, "So mind explaining what that was?" What they witnessed left them all perplexed and left them wondering just what Rukido had done. "What's his quirk?" "Oh, he's fully quirkless," Nezu remarked, taking pleasure in their astonished looks. With words he had heard before coming back to him, Yagi questioned, "You allowed someone with no quirk to take a test for the hero course?" Mike asked in a bewildered tone, "But what about that speedy lizard and the diamond guy? You don't simply transform into two entirely different creatures and then claim that you don't possess a quirk." XLR8 or Speedy Lizard as you call him and Diamond Head are their names. It makes Mr. Sato slightly angry if they try to come up with names for his transformations. Nezu was pleased to tell them. Getting impatient, Aizawa said, "Will you tell us already?" Pressing a button on the side, Nezu explained, "Rukido Sato is quirkless, but is in possession of powerful technology." The watch that Rukido had been wearing appeared, and the screen came to life. This is how he transforms into new and different creatures, via selection of his own choice. Power Loader and the other heroes stared in shock, saying, A watch is how he's able to transform." He was unaware of anything that could change a person into, well, anything. Not a single gadget had ever been made that let people change into anything they desired, though some did support transformation quirks. Who made this? Exodus? Gentech? The Shields? No, I'm afraid I can't give you any information as of this moment. It's for safety reasons, but you have nothing to worry about. Nezu replied. The fact that a young man was in possession of a potent device left the heroes unsure of how to react. Nezu laughed, and Midnight questioned, "What is that thing anyway?" "I believe he called it, the Omnitrix." 3 weeks later, UA University, Heights Alliance. For those who received their notice letters for UA, 3 weeks had passed since the exam. In order to start their journey as global heroes, the university is currently making their way to the renowned Hero College. They would start a demanding 4 years inside UA after selecting their courses and sending them in by email. To be the hero that the world and its citizens would rely on. Speaking of future heroes, as Rukido passed through the main hall, he thought, "This dorm house looks more like a hotel." He was now sporting a green hoodie, brown cargo pants, black combat boots, and a basic white t-shirt. He also had a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. He was aware of UA being fantastic in and of itself, but he believed they would have kept it straightforward. They aren't cheap, I'll give them that much. From behind, a voice exclaimed, "Not from what I've seen so far." When he turned around, he saw a boy his own age, 5 and 10 feet tall, with silver eyes, rosy white skin, and short, slicked back black hair. He was dressed simply in brown boots, black jeans, and a red flannel shirt. "Galva Solaris, pleased to meet you." Rukido Sato, likewise smiley. Galva chuckled a little as they shook hands, and Rukido grinned warmly. "So you want to give me the rundown on this place?" Galva led him into the living room and exclaimed, "Right. So this place has 3 floors. The 3rd floor is the girls' dorm. The 2nd floor belongs to us guys and the 1st and main floor. Well, it's a few things." "Oh, go on." "Right. So the main room here is a giant living room with a huge widescreen TV and off to the side is the kitchen. Across from that is the washing room. The freezer is in there along with the circuit breaker. On the other side is the gym where we're allowed to practice with our quirks, outside of classes. Other than that, just the basement that's supposed to be used for storage." "Ah, sounds like the whole set. Anything about clubs or only in the school itself? Inquiring about our roommates, Rukido said, gotcha. Know anything about our roommates? Galva smiled brightly before things got a little tense. Not much really, but this one girl, Mina, wanted to do this dorm meeting thing so we could all get to know one another better, she said. Though it was supposed to happen when everyone got here. So maybe later today if everyone is up for it. Rukido said, deadpan, alright. Well, I still have to get to my room. He was holding up his bag. Galva gestured to the exit and said, oh right, sorry. Stairs are behind us. After giving a nod, Rukido started walking up to his dorm room. Galva put a hand on his chin behind him and hummed to himself. Huh. That guy gave me a strange feeling. I wonder what kind of tech he has. Later, he would have to inquire. Rukido, meanwhile, had gone into his new room and nodded at the arrangement. It was a reasonably good room, complete with a closet, a computer, a dresser, a bed, and a separate bathroom. It was easy, and they were free to arrange and decorate the rooms. As long as they did so within reason, of course. It was flawless. He walked to the bed, tossed the duffel bag on top, then picked up his luggage and opened it. He grunted in agony as a black blur instantly tackled him into the bed. Ship. Ship. Exclaimed a cheerful but technological voice. Its black body was surrounded by green lines, which led to a green circle that appeared to be its eye and glowed whenever it chirped. It was also about the size of a dog. As he lifted the dog and put him on his shoulder, Rukido said, hey Ship, sorry about the case. To put it mildly, his encounter with Ship was interesting. Simply put, it was a story that would have to wait until later. Ship. Relax, I just didn't want you to suddenly run off again like you did last time, said Rukido. Ship was an inquisitive animal who always ran away when they were in a new place. I rather not think about getting you a leash. Ship. The dog, Cleary, did not approve of the plan. Rukido rubbed Ship's head and said, it's a joke, relax. He could laugh when he saw his friend instantly relax before lifting his arm and turning on the Omnitrix. Okay, how do we use XLR8 and hit a milkshake stand? Ship. As the room turned green, Rukido pressed down on the watch and said, glad you agree. Living room, UA University, Heights Alliance, later. Where is he? Galva surveyed the now full room and wondered. Mina had already left to get the class together for what she called their first meeting, or party. When he attempted to enter Rukido's room, nothing was there. Dude, I truly wanted to. Your friend coming or not? Galva almost threw out his seat. Eep! He yelled. He turned around with a feeble smile, but a hand held him down as he clutched his chest. Hey Taya. Taya Nightingale was a formidable 6.5 feet tall, with fair skin, ruby red eyes, and dull silver hair that reached her back in purple tips. She had two pointed black horns on her head, a long tail that was currently raised off the ground, and long, folded black wings that came from her back. She had on a red skirt, black casual shoes, and a basic white blouse. He had been friends with Taya since their early adolescence. In an attempt to obtain the autographs of the heroes in attendance, they had met at a hero convention. Taya had nearly destroyed everything he had gathered when he crashed into Galva while searching for the dragon heroine, Ryukyu. That day, she met Galva, who was incredibly forgiving and really enjoyed conversing with her, even though she had never found Ryukyu. When they had to leave, it almost broke her heart because she had also enjoyed Galva's company that day. But before she left, Galva had essentially thrown his number in her face, forcing her to promise to call him as soon as they had the opportunity. They had come to know each other since then. When it came to heroes, comics, movies, and pretty much anything sci-fi related, Galva was an absolute nerd. To put it briefly, he had an intriguing mindset and was a weeb for anything that he liked. In spite of this, he demonstrated his own interest in technology and demonstrated that, for the most part, he could easily comprehend the inner workings of a machine. He was always vivacious, a very gregarious friend, and a pleasant person to be around. Even so, his thoughts have a tendency to stray occasionally, sometimes to uncharted territory. Conversely, Taya came across as incredibly arrogant, patient, and well-mannered overall. If you don't know her, that is. In actuality, she was incredibly bipolar, shifting her mood quickly based on the topic of conversation. And it should come as no surprise to Galva that she was a huge fan of all things cute. With a patient tone, Taya said, Galva, I trust your new friend will be here soon? Galva laughed nervously. Yeah, he should be back here soon, I think. Taya smiled and said, good, I do hope they're as friendly as you say they are. Then her face twisted into a frown. Unlike that dirty blonde we had met before. Galva said, perplexed. Huh? Katsumi was kinda cool. Maybe keeps to herself a bit, but she's cool. Taya snarled, her brother. Galva concurred, oh. Yeah, he was kinda dick. Think he was constipated or something. Before Taya could reply, Rukido entered the room with 2 milkshakes and Ship on his shoulder. Everyone in the room paused to stare at them, or more precisely, at Ship. Curious and perplexed, Galva said, what you got there? Without missing a beat, Rukido said, a milkshake. In contrast, Ship had leaned forward and started sipping from one of the drinks. Hey, don't drink so fast or else you'll get a brain freeze. Ship, unsure of what to call it, Galva said, I meant your pet. He missed his friend trembling as he considered it. Rukido took a sip of his milkshake and said, oh, this is Ship, my dog. Oh, cool, exclaimed Galva, his eyes full of stars. May I pet him? Taya said in a quiet voice. Rukido nodded and shrugged, but Galva's eyes widened as he turned to face her. Taya ran toward Rukido and Ship before her friend could say anything, snatching the odd dog and immediately starting to cuddle him. Oh boy. Taya called out, too quickly to be fully understood, you're the cutest thing I've seen in forever, and started to pet his head. Ship made an eye smile and started vibrating joyfully, seemingly unconcerned. Rukido muttered as Galva carefully removed his phone, only to have Taya's tail slam it to pieces right away. No. My data. As she held Ship, Taya merely growled before catching herself and making a little fake cough. Forgive my excitement. She continued to pet Ship. Rukido sat down on the couch and said, it's fine. To Taya's dismay, Ship leapt from her and landed on his lap. He swiftly finished his milkshake and leaned over. So where's everyone else? Galva threw up a fist bump and exclaimed, Mina's gathering them up right now. We're having this meet up one way or another. Mina succeeded in persuading everyone to come downstairs, as Galva had mentioned. Fortunately, there was enough space in the living room for everyone. It was decided that everyone would just introduce themselves as though they were already new to the school. Let's get started with the introductions. Mina Ishido was an exuberant, gregarious, and carefree girl. She enjoyed dancing, shopping, and spending time with her friends. She also made it apparent that she detested bullies and anyone who intentionally hurt her friends. She was a bit of an airhead aside from that. At least a determined airhead. Toru Hagakure came next. She was a happy, vivacious girl with a very positive outlook. She shared Mina's high level of social interaction. She enjoyed shopping, having friends, plush toys, and cute things. Her invisibility quirk was also readily apparent, but she didn't appear to mind. Despite his intimidating appearance, Mezzo Shoji was surprisingly courteous and amiable. He gave the impression of having only basic needs and not being hasty to make snap judgments. He appeared to have a mutant-type quirk that gave him multiple arms and affected his body. Denki Kaminari comes next. Although he was an outgoing, gregarious, and enthusiastic man, he was a complete flirt with the girls. He even attempted, but failed, to impress them with a few tricks he knew. He had been rejected thus far, which was unfortunate for him, but he was adamant. He looked like an airhead, perhaps even more so than Mina. The Yayorozu family's heir, Momo Yayorozu, came next. Despite coming from a wealthy family, she was surprisingly sweet and somewhat naive. But aside from that, she seemed like a lively but collected young woman who was eager to meet new people and had a strong desire to follow in their footsteps and become a hero like the others. Tenya Iida came next. As soon as he heard the name Iida, it became clear that he was related to Tenya's brother, Tensai Iida. Tenya himself struck me as direct, serious, incredibly well-behaved, and disciplined. Additionally, his intense behavior and extreme hyperactivity caused him to make erratic hand gestures. Eijiro Kirishima came next. He was an exuberant, gregarious man who had a strange affinity for masculinity. He spoke passionately about how the Red Riot served as his inspiration for becoming a hero. In general, he seemed to be a gregarious, highly motivated, and well-liked individual. Next up was Suyu Asui. She had a killer poker face to go along with being very direct and easygoing. She also expresses her thoughts, including her opinions about other people, clearly. She seemed unaffected by what other people thought, though, and was generally composed and level-headed. Katsuki Bakugo came next. In general, he was an aggressive person who was crude, conceited, and short-tempered. Declaring that he would become the #1 hero, he even went so far as to refer to them as extras, as though they were in a movie. Katsumi Bakugo, his sister, came after him. She claimed to be much more composed than her twin, despite being equally conceited and a little irritable. However, she also made it apparent that building a friendship with her would not be simple. She had fair skin, ruby red eyes, and short, dirty, spiky blonde hair. She was about a head shorter than her brother. Shoko Todoroki was next. Through her father, Enji Todoroki, also known as Endeavor, Todoroki gained another well-known name. She really didn't give much, and she came across to them all as emotionless and icy. She had pale skin and was slightly taller than Katsumi. The iris of her right eye was a dark gray, slightly brownish, and the iris of her left eye was turquoise. Her most noticeable feature was a burn scar on the left side of her face, but her hair was also evenly divided between the colors white and red. Nobody was brave enough to question her. Izuku Midoriya came next. During his introduction, he remained quiet, timid, and generally shy. Despite his reserve, he made an effort to be amiable and courteous to the others. He made a concerted effort to conceal his obvious insecurity behind a smile. Next was Ochako Uraraka. She showed a great deal of politeness and was very vivacious and friendly with her peers. She was friendly and lively during her introduction, which made her classmates like her almost immediately. Next, Rikido Sato gave his introduction. Like many of them, he was very amiable and even showed a great deal of interest in baking. To his surprise and embarrassment, a few students begged him to try it, and he said he would later. Kyoka Jiro followed. Hers was brief, ensuring she was at least amiable despite her lack of enthusiasm for introducing herself. She sat back down right away, though, as if she was a little embarrassed to acknowledge her interest in music. Fumikage Tokiyami came next. He introduced himself solely by saying his name and maintaining his composure. But Dark Shadow, his quirk, had made a big deal out of humiliating Tokiyami in front of everyone by claiming that he was just being cool to avoid feeling ashamed. Next came Minoru Mineta. The short boy with the grape motif was a pervert who wished to sleep with a harem of girls. During his introduction, he had gazed at the majority of the girls with nothing but lust, his thoughts straying beyond just obscene locations. He was a pervert, to put it simply. Not nearly as good as a Super 1, though. Soon after, Rukido, Galva, and Taya gave brief introductions, saying only what was necessary. After that, there was a little party, which was really just them hanging out in various groups. Iida, Izuku, Ochako, and Katsumi were one group. Iida made a dramatic bow and exclaimed, "I wish to apologize for my behavior during the entrance exam." While Uraraka was trying to keep his composure and Katsumi just gave him an irritated look, Izuku could only look embarrassed. "It was both rude and highly unprofessional of me. I hope you consider forgiving me." Izuku smiled weakly and said, It's all right. Really it is. Still, I would have never expected them to put in a rescue system within the test. You truly are a genius, Midoriya." Iida commended integrity. While the others were fleeing, Izuku had blown the zero-pointer away with a single, powerful blow, saving Uraraka. "Oh no, I didn't figure out anything." Izuku held up his hands in a gesture. He made the decision to clarify after noticing Iida's perplexity. "I didn't even know about the rescue point system at all. I moved on my own after seeing Uraraka trapped. If I didn't then, how could I call myself a hero then?" Iida remained motionless and silent for a moment before bowing once more. "You're a true inspiration to us all, Midoriya. I hope to reach the same league as you one day." Izuku was only able to laugh nervously. Katsumi glared at the greenette and remarked, "Whatever, he shouldn't have been an idiot about it in the first place. Had he thought a bit more, he would have used his quirk to get rid of that debris before pulling her into an alley or something instead of lunging up at the thing and breaking his arm like a dumbass." Language Bakugo-san. Whatever 4 eyes. Oh, that reminds me. Katsumi turned to Uraraka, ignoring Iida's words. "Thanks for saving him, round face. We'll owe you one." Unconsciously prodding her checks, Uraraka said in confusion, "Oh, it was no problem. Wait, round face? She prefers giving out nicknames than remembering people's names. Don't worry about it though, if she warms up to you, she may say your name. Eventually," Izuku said with a low voice. Katsumi gave Zuku a rather sour look and said, "Don't count on it, Zuku." Wide-eyed, Ochako cried, "That's such a cute nickname." Katsumi sputtered and blushed instantly. "It ain't like that, round face," protested Katsumi, her face flushed with shame and rage. She was reduced to merely huffing in frustration after Lucky Izuku calmed her down in a matter of seconds. Iida gave the greenette a grateful glance, but Uraraka thought it was all cuter. Uraraka said in an inquisitive tone, "How do you know each other? You sound like you've been friends for a long time." Izuku merely grinned, but Katsumi actually turned her head away with a guilty look. We have been friends ever since we were born actually. Our moms knew each other before then and are still friends up to this day. Me, Katsumi and Katsuki were great friends. For a while that is. Izuku stated with a gloomy tone. As Izuku rapidly pulled himself up, Katsumi appeared to sink further. But it's only because we grew apart a couple years back, but we reconnected about less than a year ago, so it's fine. Better than ever. But that was not the whole truth. Flashback. Assistance. Help. Someone. As Katsumi continued to try and fail to get away, she thought. She never once thought she would be in a hostage situation, of all the things that could happen. Even worse, she was being held captive by a slime villain who was utilizing her body and touching her in particular locations. Her mind was racing with panic as she attempted to flee with blast after blast, only to have them miss entirely and strike nearby structures. She was surrounded by many people, but none of them was taking any action. Not even the professional heroes who were merely maintaining crowd control. To put it simply, she was alone. Fuck, still straining to escape, Katsumi thought. As she did, she reflected on her life and how, in some sick way, she did deserve this. Didn't I make a mistake? Zuku. Her school portrayed her as a model student, but she wasn't. She treated everyone she didn't think was worthy with rudeness, arrogance, ambition, and general snobbery. But she didn't think she deserved it for that reason. No, she believed that one person she had elevated above herself, a friend who never gave up and always saw her in the light, was the reason she deserved it. Her first friend and the person she hurt the most was Izuku Midoriya. She was at the time on par with her brother, if not worse. Many children in the town made fun of Izuku's quirkless personality right away, calling him out for not being normal in their eyes. At first, she didn't mind, but she had become enraged after hearing about his desire to be a hero all the time. She had a blast to the face from the anger that had ended their friendship. He didn't stop, though. Even though he didn't discuss it much, it was obvious that he still aspired to be a hero. He was criticized by her, her brother, and his thugs for living in a fantasy world, but for some reason, that wasn't the cause. While Izuku felt empty and nearly thought it was pointless, Katsuki took pleasure in torturing her. She would now try to ignore him completely and get rid of him from her mind, but she was unable to do so. He repeatedly attempted to re-establish his friendship with her and Katsuki, but they consistently turned him down because her brother was much more combative. In her mind, it was much worse, so she had simply ignored him. She never said a word or even raised an arm to assist him when he was verbally and physically assaulted. She chose to ignore it even though there was always something telling her to do something, anything at all. He made her angry, so that's an excuse. Katsumi clenched her eyes shut, threatening to cry, thinking, I. A voice echoed just as she was ready to release her grip. Kid, stop. You again. She saw Izuku Midoriya, whom she had severely tortured, rush directly at her, and her eyes snapped to life as shock swept through her entire body. Not even the astonished heroes were attempting to approach him any closer. He was the only one. The green tea yelled, "Let her go," with a resolute and angry expression on his face. Izuku had hurled his unexpectedly heavy backpack into the slime villain's open eye just as he was about to attack, causing him to scream in agony. Izuku closed in on them, seized Katsumi's hand, and started to drag her away. As Katsumi put it, what the hell are you doing? You're gonna get yourself killed." But Izuku, who was still recuperating from it, just grunted as he pulled even harder. Why? Just why? Because, you looked like you needed saving. Izuku forced a smile as she successfully exited. That was all Katsumi could do before Izuku was able to move her arm and aim it at the slime villain's eye. Now blast him already. As soon as she realized his scheme, she detonated an explosion, successfully destroying the slime villain's face. As a result, he was less focused because Izuku had essentially tore Katsumi out and pulled her away, causing the slime that was still surrounding her to start to fall off. Izuku moaned and Katsumi stared at him in disbelief as they both struck the ground hard. She had been saved by Izuku. You little shits. The slime villain had quickly assembled himself as he lunged at the two teens as they froze on instinct. The heroes had finally gotten off their feet and were moving in to help, but none more so ever than the man of the hour. Not you again. As Katsumi watched in disbelief as All Might lifted her and Izuku up, he grinned broadly and said, "To think I could be so pathetic, allowing young children to fight my battles for me. But there's nothing to be afraid of. Why? Since I'm present. Up close, it's much cooler. I'm going to hell with you." As the slime villain was ready to strike once more, All Might pulled his fist back. Destroyed. OSONOFA. Smash, it rained because of him. She and Izuku were left to the heroes after All Might fled. In all honesty, she was aware of how wonderful her quirk was, but this was incredibly foolish. Of all things, her bravery was the reason she was receiving praise. No, scared and panicked sounded more accurate. But when she noticed that Izuku was being reprimanded for becoming involved, she almost lost her temper. The heroes who were supposed to perform her duties punished him because he was the only one who could truly accomplish something without using a quirk. He was the fucking hero. It took her this long to realize how much of a jerk she was. She moved to Izuku and Kamui Woods, leaving the prosing heroes behind, and then she drew the greenette away from him. Promelty told Kamui to fuck off and do your damn job next time, before dragging Izuku away from them after Kamui attempted to stop her. She complained as she moved them into the narrow alleys between houses, avoiding any other people in her path. You Sumi. I wonder how she came to have such a cute nickname. She was fierce, not adorable. What? You're pulling too hard. Dude. Katsumi let go, feeling regret. Yeah, that sounded right. I fucked, sorry. Sumi. Are you alright? Perhaps it was because of the slime villain, or perhaps it was because she apologized. That sounded more pitiful than she had anticipated, but Izuku asked, obviously concerned. Katsumi looked down to avoid his stare and said, I know, I'm not. She was not at all comfortable with his concern being directed at her. Listen, She felt a pair of arms encircle her and pull her into an embrace, but she was interrupted. She had no choice but to freeze at the contact while Izuku spoke. I won't leave you alone. You won't be alone. I'm here. She had to deal with the overwhelming reality of today after being kidnapped, violated, used as a weapon against others, almost killing someone, regretting what she had done to Izuku, and almost dying herself. She quickly put her arms around her childhood friend's neck and let her head pierce his neck, tears welling up in her eyes. She sobbed aloud and apologized repeatedly while a bewildered Izuku remained there and tried his best to console her. After several minutes, she was finally able to gather herself and calm down. She was alive, but she almost died, and Izuku was responsible for it all. With a defeated smile, Katsumi muttered, "Tch, I'm such a bitch." She withdrew and turned to face Izuku before he could argue. I'm a stupid bitch, honestly I have no idea what I'm thinking. Sumi. I'm sorry. Well, for everything. For no longer being your friend. You allowed Katsuki and his thugs to beat you. She wept uncontrollably as she grasped her shoulders, a chill running down her spine. I know you don't care, at least you shouldn't, she said, letting the tears fall freely. I know you don't care, at least you shouldn't, she said. It's not about me. No, Izuku surprised her by yelling. As he talked, she was compelled to give him another hug. You're my best friend. I know things weren't easy when it came to me in my condition. That word didn't sit well with her. Izuku stated bluntly, his tone softening, but I never once blamed you or even Katsuki for all that. It's just the way the world is and we just got caught up in it. I want us to be friends again, more than anything. I won't give up on you. I promise, Sumi. Fuck. As Katsumi felt the tears welling up once more, she thought. She hummed to herself while resting her head on his shoulder, wondering who had chosen to become a living, breathing cinnamon roll like Izuku. But every pleasant moment has to end. The friends were startled out of their embrace when All Might yelled, I am here, from around the corner. Izuku yelled, All Might, as Katsumi stared at the man in disbelief. I thought you were running away from the reporters. All Might was caught in a puff of smoke and exclaimed, Ha! As if they could ever catch up to All Mig Blah. He then spat up blood. A thin, skeletal man emerged from the smoke, and all she could do was watch with wide eyes. Darn, I thought I could hold it longer. What the fuck? Katsumi uttered slowly as her thoughts started to process and gradually reached a conclusion. When the skeleton said, I thought you were alone, young Midoriya, he appeared more anxious than before. Who knows, you might be young, Dai pedo faker. Oh no, Katsumi no. Yes, Katsumi. Flashback over, with a sly, smug grin, Katsumi thought, I still can't believe I kicked All Might in his balls. In her opinion, a victory is a victory, but she was going to confront him later, if he still had the time. Izuku thought, with a feeble smile, she's thinking about kicking All Might again. However, even he had to concede that All Might have somewhat deserved it. He thought he would never see Izuku again after coming to UA, but here he was, hanging out with his sister, and he had no idea what was going on or why he was even here, but he wasn't going to do anything about it. He believed that Izuku had either cheated to get in or had some nonsense excuse for being there, and that Deku, his name, was worthless, and that he was going to be expelled once the teachers realized he had no worth having no quirk. Unfortunately, tomorrow he would have to deal with reality. In the meantime, Kirishima, Mina, Kaminari, Jiro, and Momo formed another group. So much for a party, then. Kaminari groaned and complained, "We don't have any nachos." Really? Nachos? There were a lot of things missing, to be honest, but nachos? Really? Jiro said, obviously irritated by his response. With his head held high, Kaminari said firmly, "Hey, I say that it's important to have. Thank you very much. Maybe you ought to know that before all." He jolted in excruciating pain as Jiro poked her jacks in his ear. Jiro reeled in her jack and said simply, "Next time, don't be a jerk." It hurt. Looking at his downed friend, Kirishima laughed and said, "Talk about getting one-shotted, man." Kirishima could only laugh as he rubbed the back of his head, a nervous expression on his face, and Jiro smirked and said, "Watch it, Red, you might go down next. Besides, he deserved it." "Did I actually?" Kaminari, just beginning to recover, inquired. Jiro stated bluntly, Maybe not, but it'll shut you up at least." "Very mean." Momo smiled softly and gently and said, "Please refrain from harming one another." She was not accustomed to such informal conversation, but she welcomed the change. "I do hope we can all get along." "Me too. Oh, I'm going to organize a ton of sleepovers and parties, but I think I'm more excited for the hero course," Mina said proudly, raising her fist in the air and then lowering it. "We can use our powers to the fullest." "Yes, I do hope we have some fantastic fights." He essentially expected them all to be sparring with their classmates, other classes, their teachers, and possibly even other schools, Kirishima declared. Jiro shivered and recalled the zero-pointer, saying, "If the entrance exam said anything, we'll be fighting a lot while we're here." As if it were easy, Momo stated, "It is to be expected, we are going to have to face villains someday. However, that won't be the only topic we cover. Basic medical care, hostage situations, and rescue training. When it comes to hero training in general, there are a lot more to discuss." Jiro moaned in his head about how long it would take, but in the end, it was worthwhile. And we get 4 whole years to learn it all. When Momo saw their joyful expressions, she smiled and said, "But we'll be able to receive our hero licenses by the beginning of next year." She was about to continue when someone cut her off. As he and Taya approached them, Galva said, "We can also get involved in hero stuff during the internships. I hope you don't mind us joining in. Kinda got kicked out of the kitchen by Sato and Rukido. They take cooking very seriously, man." Taya noted, "You were trying to take some of the food early." "Hey," Galva adamantly stated, "they shouldn't have excluded it. It's not my fault that I'm starving. You know that my nanites depend on me completely, and food helps with that." "Nanites?" After a long period of silence, Kaminaru finally spoke, his thoughts still focused on being poked by Jiro. "Yes. Would you mind if we sat down?" As he spoke, Taya decided to stand and lean against a wall. "So yeah, my quirk, as I like to call it, is Evo, and it gives me nanites that I can use to construct mechanical weapons among other things," Galva said, already settling into a chair. "Observer. I can also use them to hack most machines as well, kinda like reading a book to be honest," Galva said, holding up a hand, unable to contain his laughter as blue, tech-like lines appeared on them before red and black appeared, forming a massive fist. Although the nanites are capable of regeneration, eating speeds up their recovery. "Oh, I can create certain things by using up my fat cells so long as I know the components of what I'm creating," Momo said, pointing out a small doll that resembled her. "That sounds similar to mine." With a gloomy cloud over his head, Galva uttered, "That sounds infinitely cooler than mine." It was not my intention to make you feel bad." Kaminari pointed after giving it a lot of thought. "Oh, I get it now," she said. "Your quirk works like poop." Momo and Galva looked down with sad faces, and now Momo had a cloud of depression over her head. Before a massive tail slammed over his head and knocked him to the ground, Kaminari appeared perplexed. Before he screamed as Jiro stabbed him with her jacks once more, he let out a painful groan. Jiro and Taya both glanced down at him, then turned to face each other and nodded. Move in a combo. Rukido, Sato, Mezzo, and an inquisitive Toru were in the kitchen finishing up the food preparation for everyone. Toru watched them. Work magic and asked, "Can you guys teach me how to cook?" As he finished adding lemon juice to another curry bowl, Rukido said, "Sure, I can spare the time." For a little variation, he made sure to switch things up a little. To keep things from becoming too messy, Sato clarified, we're going to need a way to bring them to people. I rather not have the kitchen overrun. Mezzo created a few limbs and remarked, I can carry a few, but not much. I should be able to bring them out a few times. Rukido removed his apron and said, no need, I got this. As the Omnitrix came to life, he raised his arm and cycled through it, activating it. Mezzo started, what is that? But Rukido pressed the dial and a bright flash filled the room. A new metamorphosis emerged as the light dimmed. With its white skin, black and white head and face, black shoulders, large 4-digit hands, and stubby feet, it was roughly the height of an average human child. Additionally, it had gem-like extended sensory nodes on his arms and waist, as well as 3 fin-like growths on his head. Ha ha! Ditto in action, exclaimed the short creature that resembled a mole. What? Sato asked, bewildered and in disbelief. Mezzo simply raised an eyebrow, not seeing how this would be beneficial. However, Toru was attempting to restrain herself from giving the adorable mole thing a hug. As his eyes bugged out, the mole said, Ditto's the name and then abruptly split into 2 identical versions of himself. Splitting is our game. Huh. How useful. Mezzo observed Ditto further fragment. 20 Dittos soon arrived in the room with a bowl of curry for the class. I can carry my own, but thank you. A Ditto said, anytime, and then turned to face the others. All right fellas, let's get to work. Before long, a group of Dittos rushed out of the kitchen, carrying bowls of curry and shouting, curry time. Curry time. The class just stared in disbelief as they came to them, each carrying a bowl of curry. Enjoy! Shouted the Dittos. To put it mildly, it was odd. Oh, and Sato's making a huge cake as well, he's making a big one. Really? Mina and Kaminari cried out, drooling as they considered it. Mineta said, are we just gonna ignore these guys, in reference to the Dittos? Asui thanked one of the Dittos for giving her a bowl and replied, no. As he sat down with his own bowl, Mezzo remarked, looks like everyone got their meal. Before he was caught in a green flash as Rukido took his place, the Ditto nodded and quickly moved toward one another, merging again as they soon became one. Do you not plan to have one yourself? Rukido shrugged and sat down beside Jiro, who appeared taken aback. Not hungry, so turns out I was right. Jiro mockingly glared and said, yeah, you were. But did you have to leave so suddenly? I was gonna try and get your number after all. Sorry about that, but something at work came up. Work? My grandfather works in plumbing, nothing too special. Well, this is bothering me. How are you? World News 45. Who switched on the television? For 160 years, Exodus Industries has maintained its position as the world's top robotics company. Its owners have been protected from robberies and break-ins thanks to their security drones. However, because of the growing number of heroes, the campaign to have similar machines on the streets has failed. Proponents of Exodus share this hope, seeing it as what the world needs at this moment. Is this the appropriate decision? Soon enough, find out. Another story is that 12-year-old Kana Ikura committed suicide. Small and quirkless, Kana spent the majority of her life being teased and harassed, even by her own family. We have not yet released any information regarding the young girl's death, and the school is disputing any allegations made by the police. Although police will investigate, it appears they have little chance of identifying the individuals who drove this girl to this point. Kana's story will be covered in more detail later. Gen Tech will now celebrate yet another procedure that saved a hero's career. And turn off. With the young girl's death still fresh in their memories, the class remained silent, but before long, everyone turned to see Kirishima standing over a table, growling, and the sound of a table breaking could be heard. Damn. Despite his shaking, Kirishima was able to escape. Mina scowled as she got to her feet and tried to soothe him by putting a hand on his shoulder. But Iida quickly raised her voice and moved ahead of the enraged redhead. Kirishima, please control yourself. I know what happened is terrible, but you must keep a level head and prevent yourself from damaging school property. Iida apologized to a fellow pupil. But Kirishima scowled at him, obviously unable to handle him calmly. It's unfortunate, but it's expected in. Anticipated. This shouldn't be taking place, all because people can't accept others for not being born the same way they are. Kirishima roared, causing the others to jump. Because, of all things, they don't have a quirk. I understand your sympathy for those who are less fortunate, but there's no justification for letting anger control you. It may be sad, but without a quirk, things are not easy to take on in life. Iida went on, missing Kirishima's snarling at him. I apologize, but it is unrealistic to expect the less fortunate to survive without one. When everyone turned to see Rukido holding his chest and holding his head high as he continued to laugh as if he were crazy, Izuku flinched hard, and Kirishima appeared ready to yell more at the boy before the room erupted in overly dramatic laughter. Wiping a mock tear from his eye, he turned to Iida and grinned broadly, saying, I'm sorry, however, I couldn't help but chuckle at your ignorance. What? Rukido's face became serious as Iida appeared stunned. Sato, I am just telling the truth, it is a known fact that. Rukido raised an eyebrow and said, that what? Quirkless people have no value to the world, so they should just be thankful for what they get. That isn't what I meant at all, but it is a fact that most businesses and people will choose someone with a quirk that fits the job description. Can you say that if you were quirkless, then you would have made it here? Rukido rolled his eyes and declared, I am quirkless. Rukido raised his watch and said, all right, I'll keep this brief so that I don't interfere with your reboot process. This thing is my power. I transform into what I want to fight. It has nothing to do with my body at all, outside of rearranging my DNA. I have no quirk. That got through your processing unit? They stared at him in shock and bewilderment, and the room fell silent. Though they were hesitant, they wanted to confront him and tell him that it was impossible. In fact, was that possible? His claim that a watch of all things was his power was simply unbelievable, and his quirklessness was startling. Also, just so you know, UA does allow people with no quirks to enter. If the headmaster allows it, then it's for a good reason. Be sure you remember that next time before you decide to lecture me. Rukido continued, clearly offended by his tone. He sat up and was about to go when he noticed Katsuki approaching him. What do you want? With an undertone of anger, Katsuki growled, enough of this bullshit. There's no damn way you're quirkless. He considered UA to be foolish. To admit worthless individuals with unrealistic expectations and no actual authority. You have a stupid fucking quirk, so stop with this shit or else. Rukido grinned slightly and said, what? Do you want to see my medical records? Then please, be my guest. With an aggressive tone that matched his face, Katsuki uttered, you're serious? In that case, get the hell out of this school. UA is for the best of the best. It's bad enough I have to deal with these extras, but you and Deku? No, I won't have some quirkless bastard looking down at me. Bro. Not cool. Yeah, you don't decide WHO gets to stay or not. Katsumi yelled, will you shut up, you annoying piece of SHT. Without having to deal with her brother. How did he get this bad, really? With an unwavering grin, Rukido said, no, how about you leave? He laughed as he watched Katsuki detonate an explosion in his hand. Honestly, what is your deal, buddy? You make it look like someone with no quirk beat you multiple times. Wait, is that what happened? Wouldn't surprise me really given your attitude. With an arm jerked back to slam an explosion, Katsuki questioned, like hell I would. You quirkless fucks are nothing short of a waste of everyone's time and stepping stones from me being the greatest. If I need to beat you for you to realize your place, then I'll fucking do it. But of all the things he anticipated, he never saw a pair of toasts fly at him and strike him with enough force to topple him. The fuck? He and the class sat up straight and turned to face the other side of the room, where their toaster was standing on top of the couch, plugged in and threateningly loading another pair of toast with its cord. The toaster appeared to hiss as it turned black with green tech-like lines, saying, sheep. As he leapt to his feet, Katsuki yelled, WWWHO, the fuck do you think you are, huh? Approaching me, his hands exploded. As it got ready to approach, the toaster hissed, ship. Ship. Sheep. With the exception of Rukido, who snorted, nobody knew what it had said. They could only surmise that it was something challenging or offensive. Katsuki started, then come as close as you like, you damn. But Rukido slapped him over the head. As he walked past the twitching teenager, Rukido said, yeah, no, leave my dog alone. He extended his arms in front of the toaster. Come on, boy. I'll give you a computer later. Ship. The toaster erupted in a green and black slurry, then reformed into ship. Wiggling around, he leapt into Rukido's arms and then climbed on his shoulder to rest there. Rukido merely laughed before addressing the class. Everyone meet Ship. Ship. Ship says hi. What is that? Katsuki growled as Mineta and Kaminari screamed in terror. Chopping the air, Iida yelled, Sato, pets are not allowed on UA grounds, instead. As Rukido casually petted Ship on the head and received a purr in return, he said, he's my emotional support animal now, quit trying to change up the subject. On the matter of quirkless people, just because we don't have a power given to us at birth, doesn't mean we can't be heroes either. Your quirk, my watch, are just tools for us to use in order to make saving lives and beating villains easier. That is a fact. Yes, but this bullshit must stop. I'll put you in your place like I did with shitty Deku. Katsuki roared as he lunged at Rukido to attack. Katsuki moaned in agony as a leg cloddied with the side of his head and knocked him over on his face. Look at that, Rukido thought, then ducked under Katsuki's fist, grabbed his arm, and flipped the explosive user over him, slamming him hard on his ass. It knocked you down on your ass without even transforming. Katsuki jumped to his feet, growling in a rage so red that he was about to attack again, but before he could do so, a fist struck the back of his head and Rukido was already climbing the stairs, his so-called dog staring down at him as they vanished. Will you quit being such a bothersome little pest? He was reminded of his mother by Kastumi's shouting down at him, but he wasn't scared of his sister like she was. Get out of here, bitch, cunt, underfucker. Fuck the boy. Please stop and relax. With the exception of a handful, everyone was concentrating on the now arguing twins when Iida yelled. Izuku couldn't stop thinking about the young girl who had killed herself, wondering if that might have been him in a previous life. He was also grateful that Rukido was quirkless and didn't hesitate to display his superpower, which made him question whether All Might was correct when he said that people without powers couldn't be heroes. It was worrying because some of her classmates seemed to think the same way, judging by some of the obvious nods, and Momo wondered how horrible the world would be if they were so quick to pass someone without a quirk. It was true that a quirk made for a situation was much easier, but that didn't mean that someone who had trained for the situation couldn't do the same thing. Galva seemed a little taken aback. He had never really thought much about quirklessness, as it was never a big topic in America and he had never met one until today, but now he felt a little guilty. He never hated them or anything, but he never really believed that they still existed, even though the statistics showed otherwise. Perhaps he ought to make a video about it. Taya felt conflicted because she had long known that having a quirk meant that you at least had some power and could therefore do more for the world, but she also knew that people without quirks weren't exactly supposed to live in a middle-class system. If someone could survive without a quirk, she respected them. She knew enough about quirk racism to know that not having one was much worse, and a life without her quirk sounded bad, considering how her own school treated her for her earjacks. At last, Jiro was searching for Rukido, but he didn't make it obvious that he was angry with both Iida and Katsuki. She could only imagine Rukido's experience. She got up and walked away from the group, waving briefly before heading upstairs. Change of scene. After determining the location of Rukido's room by reading the board, Jiro knocked on his door, hoping he wasn't feeling irritable. Ship's narrowed eye met her as the door opened, startling her a little before it returned to normal, and he chirped as he opened the door for her, welcoming her in. Jiro entered, letting Ship close the door before he skipped across the room and leapt on the computer, merging with it. Before noticing Rukido unpacking some clothes in front of his bed, Jiro thought, that is one strange, cute dog. Hey. It was anything but lame. Hi. Rukido put a small cardboard box on the floor and pushed it underneath, saying, sorry, just unpacking some stuff here. He got up, sat on his bed, and looked up at her, asking, what's up? Jiro said clumsily, I just wanted to check up on you after, you know. Oh, I see. Well, neither Boom Boom Boy nor Iida have my ire. I can only blame society for this, Rukido said, causing her to exhale in relief because she didn't want to deal with any drama on her first day. Society? Indeed, racism should have vanished long ago by now, but it hasn't. For something as trivial as having a cool power as opposed to a weak power or none at all, we still have it even after 200 years. Rukido sighed and said, it's disappointing, but sadly not surprising. From what she could tell, he sounded like he was disappointed in the world. We're born in an age where heroes and quirks are the most important thing in the world, yet we forget that all of this most of the time. Earth. With their bare hands, it was constructed by individuals who had been through hell and back, learning and growing as they ought to in order to support the following generation. It was not related to a quirk. You truly believe it to be that awful? Jiro frowned as she asked, not because she disagreed but rather to find out if he was serious. To be honest, worse. Nobody has ever called out the mistreatment of quirkless people by others, not even heroes. Rukido sighed and then gave her a little smile. It's disgusting to say the least, he said. But it's good to see that some of our generation isn't messed up. With a faint smile and a flush on her face, Jiro said, trust me, I won't be singing any of that bullshit. Anyway, I should be going. Have a good night and thanks for checking in on me, Rukido replied. Jiro nodded and said, yeah, anytime. She waved to him one last time before closing the door, and when she was gone, he groaned and sat down on his bed in frustration. Even though he could have handled that much better, he really didn't need to start anything downstairs, but damn if he didn't stay quiet either. He let out another sigh and started searching through his bag, pausing briefly to laugh as he took out a silver square piece that had a red circle in the middle that was dulled out and inactivated. Rukido held it close and grinned briefly as he gazed down at the Omnitrix, saying, "Maybe we'll get some work tomorrow. Who knows, maybe tomorrow will be better. Not like anything bad will happen crap. I jinxed myself." The Antarctic. The coldest place on Earth was normally peaceful, but just a few moments ago, it was in the midst of a battle. Red drones were attacking a small base tucked away in the icy wasteland, nowhere close to a town, and blasting armed US soldiers into nothing. Several of them flew through the main doors, passing several dead bodies on the way. One of the drones flew up to the control panel and stuck out its claw, forcing the gate to open. A wall of ice stood in their way, and a large figure was standing inside. The drones immediately went to work, firing laser-like equipment to forcefully melt the ice, and the figure remained motionless inside the ice before its eyes snapped open, revealing pure red. At last he was conscious. UA University, Class 1A is the homeroom. Their time to unwind was over when the first day arrived sooner than anyone had anticipated. Even though they weren't yet aware of it, today was the first significant step toward their transformation into heroes. Class 1A, Class 1A. Ah. Here it is. Rukido, who was now dressed in a uniform, began. He wouldn't be shocked if there wasn't some awkwardness in the classroom, considering how he left. He wasn't holding his breath, but he thought he might hear something from Iida and less from Katsuki. It's better to finish this now. He noticed that some of them, including Iida, were already present when he entered the classroom. He put his bag behind his chair and sat down by the window, making a beeline for the back. He sighed as he saw Iida approaching him and braced himself for the worst. "Hey, pardon me for being so stupid. What? Now that I think about it, what I said about the quirkless was a lot harsher. Particularly after hearing about one's passing. It was incredibly careless and unprofessional." Iida bowed his head to Rukido and said, "I apologize for my lack of consideration for the situation. It was completely unworthy of a hero." "Well, at least he sounds serious." "He always sounds serious," Rukido said after giving it some thought. "No problem. You can't blame yourself for thinking that way. It's not as though possessing a quirk isn't fantastic. Remember that it is only a tool for your use. It's not your power that makes you the hero." "I'm grateful, Sato. You have a way with words," Iida remarked, his bowing sharply increasing. "Avoid bringing it up. It sounds pretty chessy, to be honest, but it works. Call me Rukido, too," the Omnitrix wielder added, "and relax your bowing. I am neither a lord nor anything similar." "As you desire." When he had the opportunity, Iida would apologize to Kirishima. "Tensai, should you discover my ignorance, I ask that you forgive me," he said, straightening up. He was truly sorry for what he had said and had regretted it since last night. Kirishima was very outspoken about it, which made him feel guilty. The first day is never easy, and Rukido was already preparing for whatever jinx he brought upon himself. What? His luck was random, and he didn't take chances, so sue him. Iida left with his own thoughts in mind, while Rukido could only think about how long this day was going to be. As soon as possible, the rest of the class arrived, sat down as fast as they could, and waited impatiently for their teacher, already picturing the pro-hero who would spend the next 4 years with them. The door opened, and they all turned to see. It was a yellow bag that slithered in. Rukido confessed that, while a little frightened, that's at least in the top 50 of scary things I've seen in life. The rest? Freaking the hell out. What the devil is that thing? Oh no, what is life? Everyone tensed as the yellow bag quickly moved to the middle of the class and opened, revealing a messy, hobo-looking man with shaggy hair and an odd scarf around his neck. He gave them a dead-eyed look before pulling out a packet of juice and drinking from it in front of everyone. After he was done, he spoke. Aizawa said in a dull, bored voice, "Welcome to UA's hero course." He then pulled out a pack of juice and drank it all before slowly getting out of his cocoon and saying, "You all went silent quickly, good. If you hadn't, I would have been irritated." Izuku looked at the hero, perplexed, thinking, who is this guy? If he's here, then he must be a hero, but I can't put my finger on who he is. Aizawa stunned them all by saying, "My name is Shota Aizawa and I'll be your teacher." This man, who already appeared exhausted and worn out, was meant to instruct them for 4 years. Anyway, let's get started. To put on your training gear, locate your assigned name in the locker rooms. I personally make sure that you never make it into a hero course again, so don't be late and head out to the field. What are you waiting for? Proceed. Before long, the classroom was deserted. Fields of UA, testing. Orientation was a waste. Galva grinned broadly and said, I like this guy so far. They were all waiting for their teacher to arrive, all wearing the same blue, red, and white outfit. Kaminari scowled and said, You're crazy, that guy was totally out of it. Anyway, orientation is useless. They're a waste of time, Galva said, crossing his arms and rolling his eyes. All they're going to do is introduce us to the school while going over things we already know. Taya found herself concurring, saying, I do wonder what Mr. Aizawa has planned for us though. Sadly, he isn't wrong. It must be significant enough to ignore. As he walked up to the class, Aizawa said, Good, you're not lazy. They all fell silent, afraid of what he would do if they didn't comply. No interruptions. Excellent. To properly test your limits, you will currently be taking a quirk assignment test. Standardized tests are useful, but you can't meet UA standards if you don't know where you stand. Seems fair. Taya tilted her head, clearly understanding. You scored first place on the entrance exam with approximately 200 points, Aizawa said, glancing at the student, who did not jolt and appeared more alert than before, but had a look of fatigue in his eyes. What? The other appeared stunned as Katsuki yelled. 100 rescue points, 100 Villian points. They had a maximum score point system to keep newcomers from getting big heads, but that was a lie. He actually received more because of the speed creature thing. Really, wait. Rukido, who, to be honest, didn't listen to the entire message, he just heard that he got into UA, said, I thought I got less. Aizawa pulled out a ball and threw it at Rukido, who caught it, saying, Either way, you're going first. Throw the ball as hard as you can and get the highest score possible. As he entered the field square, Rukido said, Okay. Glancing down at his watch, he walked around his selection before applying pressure that instantly blinded his classmates. He was replaced by a yellow, 10-foot-tall, robotic-looking alien with an armored body, a gray tail, and jackhammer-like parts on his hands, wrists, and elbows. His head resembled a Greek Corinthian helmet with 2 ears, giving him the appearance of an armadillo. Armadillo. They were momentarily perplexed by the robotic armadillo until the ball's hand abruptly drew itself into his arm. Armadillo steadied his aim with his free arm before launching the ball from his arm and sending it skyward. Without displaying his true admiration, Aizawa remarked, It seems to be 941 meters. He was actually more irritated than anything else because Nezu had not provided him with any information about Rukido or his device, and while his transformations had been useful thus far, he would need to see more. As Rukido reverted to his normal state, Izuku wondered, how many transformations does he even have? This seems like a lot of fun, Mina cried out with joy. Yes, I am eager for my turn to come. With a tinge of delight, Kaminari shouted. Oh, you find this enjoyable? In that case, the one with the lowest score by the end of all tests will be transferred to the general education course, Aizawa said in a tone so grim that almost everyone gasped as he went on. What? They simply couldn't accept it. With a spooky smile, Aizawa said, I get to decide how this class runs, understand? I won't be wasting time with students who don't have the potential to become heroes. You can go home now if that is an issue. Accept the challenge. Dash of 50 meters. Katsuki was working up a good sweat, but not enough to wear him out, while Galva just grinned as blue lines glowed from his pants. Before anyone could question it, red and white, mechanical parts appeared around his legs, turning them into something akin to hovering motorbikes. Galva and Katsuki stood right next to each other, eager to get the race started. The ability to shape his self-regenerating nanites into large machinery, ranging from vehicles to weapons, is Solaris quirk, nanite generation. The more nanites he has, the more he can create. Galva smiled at Katsuki while seated on the red and white hoverbike. Boom boom boy, get ready to eat my dust. With mini explosions already going off in his hands, Katsuki sneered, just stay the hell out of my way extra. Aizawa calmly said, get ready. Both fell silent as they recalled her previous words, start. Galva immediately boosted right next to Katsuki, who took the lead as he blasted across the field. Feeling a little angry, Katsuki brought both of his hands together and flipped over, releasing a blast behind him that sent him flying forward and over the finish line, with Galva finishing right behind him. Bakugo Katsuki, 7.3 seconds. As she checked the timer, Aizawa said, Galva Solaris, 7.8 seconds. Katsuki grinned at the outcome, and Galva let a pout cross his face before turning to face Katsuki and grinning rapidly. Nice race, huh? Iida Tenya, Taya Nightingale, get up here and race. Aizawa had already selected the next two racers and called them up, but Katsuki certainly didn't say anything in response, opting instead to return to the group while Galva hummed a tune behind him. Yes, sir. Iida exclaimed while Taya merely hummed. Both went up to the starting line, Iida preparing like a runner while Taya was allowing her wings to stretch out. Let us do our best, Nightingale. Obviously, they both faced down the field and toward the end, and Taya's face took on a determined glare as she spoke with unwavering resolve. Prepare. Begin. Aizawa dialed. Using a lot of power from his quirk, Iida was able to gain a head start, but Taya jumped off the ground and ran through the air just above the engine user, and when she saw that Iida was still ahead, she growled to herself as a purple aura surrounded her. Taya Nightingale. She has a mutated quirk called Dragonic Burst, which gives her the ferocious power of a dragon in human form. That's not all, though. If she accumulates enough internal power, she can release it all to further enhance her abilities. Iida was unable to react in time as Taya rushed past him and over the finish line, letting out a roar and causing a flash of purple to appear around her as she dashed down at blinding speed. She landed on her feet, using her wings to slow herself down, and exhaled as the aura around her vanished and Iida crossed the finish line. Nightingale, Taya, 3.7 seconds. 4.3 seconds, Iida Tenya, Aizawa said, sounding impressed. Sorry, you're much faster than I thought you would be. Iida uttered those words, thinking that his quirk alone would give him the upper hand, but it didn't. Iida, I apologize. Good luck the next time. Aizawa called for the next two pupils, and Taya grinned broadly as they walked back to their peers. Kaminari Denki. Sato Rukido. Aizawa said, you're up, and Denki soon let a broad smile spread across his face. Oh, that's right. I've got this under control. That wouldn't happen to be a fast guy, would it? Denki cried as he ran up to the start, feeling secure until a green flash went off behind him. He turned around and saw XLR-8 standing right beside him. Before the visor dropped, all he received was a smirk. Recalling how quick that form was, Jiro uttered, oh, he's so screwed. Aizawa looked down and said languidly, ready. Start. The moment he finished, the signal went off. Rukido Sato, 0.4 seconds. He sensed that a headache was imminent. Strength of grip. All Might. I really wished you gave more to use for one for all. I would rather not break any bones anymore. Izuku sighed as he looked at his score, which was a solid 67.2. With no strength quirk, it wasn't bad, but Mezzo's score of 540.0 made him feel a little depressed. 1-1050.2. When they turned to see Taya growling and surrounded by a purple aura, Kaminari cried out in surprise. That's Taya for you, indeed. With a score of 783.9, Galva remarked. Big Metal Fist was very helpful. Aizawa called up Rukido next, who transformed after once more activating the Omnitrix as Taya moved back into line. The humanoid creature in question was about 12 feet tall, had red skin, 2 pairs of 4-fingered arms, well-developed muscles, and a black stripe running from his chin to his lower lip. He had 4 eyes, a main pair and a smaller pair beneath them. He was dressed in black boots, green combat pants, and a black tank top. Raise your arms. The new form exclaimed as he went over to the grip. Placing a firm grip, he stopped seeing that an error message had appeared. I think I broke it. Damn it. Long jumping standing. Rukido used yet another transformation, and Aizawa's eye twitched as he jumped over with ease, revealing a small alien that looked like a monkey, with 2 legs, 4 arms, 2 pairs of green eyes, 3 fingers on each hand and 3 toes on each foot, blue fur over a dark blue center, and a tail with 2 stripes near the tip. He decided to call it Spider Monkey. Dude. Even so, how many transformations do you possess? When Rukido recovered, he actually stopped in place, narrowed his eyes, and glanced down at the watch before his eyes started to bug out. Galva asked, stars in his eyes. I don't know. Well, to be honest, I can't even recall. Aizawa heard a trace of laughter in Rukido's voice as he said, there's so many. Oh well, let's say a lot. That doesn't answer my question, it wasn't meant to. Oh. Throw the ball. At this point, Aizawa was irritated. Correctly, a headache would be less painful, because these transformations were starting to irritate him in a number of ways. Rukido himself didn't appear to be at all worn out from using them, which, although it might not have seemed like a problem to most people, was to him. He made a note to learn about everything Rukido had to offer as soon as he had the opportunity. The fact that Uraraka's score was infinitely higher than Rukido's at least pleased him. Others, like Momo or Shoko, were getting through with little trouble, while others, like him, were doing just fine. Sure, there were a few stragglers, like Toru or Denki, but they were obviously pushing themselves like the others. One person in particular was currently giving him another headache. Midoriya Izuku. He had seen what happened at the entrance exams, where he used his quirk to take out a zero-pointer in what was essentially a one-shot kill, breaking both his legs and his arm in the process, making him useless to continue, and he was annoyed that he hadn't used it yet, even though he was doing just as well as the others. Perish. As he tossed or blew up his ball, Katsuki let out a roar. The explosion boy snarled when he realized he wouldn't win this test, but his teacher didn't care because he was now interested in winning the main event. Izuku Midoriya, get over here, Aizawa said, 756.2 meters. The greenette gulped when he saw Aizawa glare at him, but Katsumi's gentle prod reminded him to continue. Izuku walked over to the spot and glared at Aizawa, barely catching the ball he threw at him. Quirkless losers should just quit, TCH said. Katsuki scoffed, missing the look his sister gave him, and Kirasama gave him a look of disappointment before he heard Iida say anything. He ain't gonna make it here, Katsuki said. What are you saying? It's true that Midoriya has a quirk, and a very strong one. While confusing the explosive user, Iida complimented him. I should know, I've seen it in action. It was a fact that Deku lacked a quirk. Knowing there was no other option, Izuku thought, dang it, I might have to use one for all if I want to get through this. But as soon as he threw the ball, his quirk abruptly cancelled out as it hit the mark of 50.1. What the? I erased your quirk. Aizawa said, while you acquired the passing amount of points, it's clear that someone like you doesn't belong here. The students were silently shocked to see their teacher, his hair standing up and his eyes glowing red, and it was generally frightening. Huh? Izuku muttered in confusion. Thanks to her quirk, Jiro heard the remark and muttered, talk about harsh. That awful. Hearing her, Galva inquired. Jiro stated, our teacher is Dick, to put it simply. You only needed one punch to eliminate a zero-pointer during the test. Aizawa chastised Izuku as he walked up to the greenette, saying, but you made yourself useless, breaking both your legs and your arm as a result. I won't waste time on someone who doesn't have a good handle on their quirk or be a liability to others when lives are at stake. You're going to toss that ball and make sure you're still standing if you want to stay here. He's right. If it had been for Uraraka at the time, I would have been. I can't save people if I can't save myself, so that's exactly what I'm going to do, Izuku said without even swallowing when the ball was thrust into his hands. Izuku threw the ball, and it flew into the sky at blinding speed, stunning those who didn't know his strength, including a bewildered and enraged Katsuki Bakugo. Aizawa watched with his quirk deactivated, wondering if the greenette could pull off, just like everyone else. He had a determined glare on his face as a plan developed in his mind. With his fist clenched so tightly that blood could be drawn, Katsuki thought, what the fuck? Mr. Aizawa, Izuku said calmly, clenching his throwing hand. Taking a look over to the one-for-all user, Aizawa allowed a grin to come across his face. Izuku was very much standing, with only a broken finger to show. I can still keep going. How about that, then? 712.9 meters. Generally impressed, Aizawa said. Not bad, problem child. Izuku laughed uneasily while tending to his broken finger, and then he turned to see Katsuki stomping his way over with strong explosions exploding in his hands. You are an absolute nerd. How the hell do you have a quirk? You're going to tell me? Katsuki roared as he prepared to rush at him only to be yanked back by his shoulder and thrown on his back. He looked up with a glare only for it to mix with confusion as he saw his sister staring down at him, ready to fire an explosion in his face. What the hell are you? He did the same after Katsumi growled, shut up. Just, shut up. From their eyes, the class saw the siblings get ready to fight before Katsumi's hands stopped exploding. What the? Aizawa glared at the twins with soul-piercing red eyes and said, enough. Get back in line or you will be expelled immediately. Katsumi appeared to stop at that point, and Katsuki just stared at their teacher in disbelief. Who on earth does he believe he is? Does he have no idea to whom he is speaking? But he kept these thoughts to himself because, for the first time, fear started to seep into his heart. With his previous teachers, he never had to worry about fighting or bothering Deku, but now, well, things seemed different. It was too dissimilar for him. Before retreating, The two Bakugos gave each other another growl. In any case, it was nearly over. Again later. As they glanced up at the field monitor, Aizawa said, "Well, that's it. Time to see your scores." First, Sato Rukido Momo Yayorozu came in second. Third, Todoroki Shoko fourth, Bakugo Katsumi. Fifth, Bakugo Katsuki Taya Nightingale, sixth. Tenya Iida, seventh eighth. Tokayami Fumikage Mezzo Shoji on the ninth. Eijiro Kirishima 10th 11th. Midoriya Izuku Galva Solaris on the 12th. 13th. Ashido Mina Ochako Uraraka on the 14th. 15th. Sato Rikido 16th. Asui Suyu Kyoka Jiro 17th. 18th. Kaminari Denki 19th. Hagakure Toru Mineta Minoru on the 20th. Mineta exclaimed, "No, my future harem. Damn you main protagonist." While the guys were either avoiding him or averting their eyes awkwardly, the girls appeared irritated by the response. "Oh yeah. I lied about busting you down to general education. Your parents all paid a lot of money for you to be here. I legally can't do that unless one of you does something incredibly stupid and harmful." Aizawa replied with a broad, shit eyes. "No, huh?" Mineta appeared to pause, initially perplexed before becoming ecstatic. Even though he was jubilant, the news disappointed almost everyone, including Aizawa. Momo said, ignoring the sardonic looks she was getting from her classmates, "I figured it was quite obvious." She felt horrible all of a sudden. With a hint of joy, Aizawa said, "You all pushed yourself to the absolute limit while also not going overboard and burning yourselves out. So you passed. However, that doesn't mean you're the best you can be. My job for the next 4 years will be to ensure that you all become pro-heroes. To overpower your weaknesses and to improve your strengths. This is UA, only the best of best are allowed to come and the greatest are allowed to leave. For now though, I will tell you now that you're going to go through hell in order to become heroes. If you want to back out, now's your chance." No one even bothered to move forward, remaining motionless as Aizawa smiled. "In that case, welcome to UA University's hero course." Perhaps it would have been better to say, "Welcome to hell." Rooms with locks. The class was more than happy to unwind for the remainder of the day after a trying period, but they were aware that their actual training would probably begin tomorrow. Good day so far, though. After removing his gym shirt, Galva remarked, "So far, I like Hobo Man, he's cool." Iida gave a severe reprimand, saying, "Solaris, it is improper and unbecoming to insult a teacher of UA. It is a shame that we missed orientation however." "What? Are you serious? Of course, you're weird." Kirishima heard them and tried not to laugh as she changed back into some regular clothes. But he saw Iida standing in front of him and heard footsteps behind him. Iida went so far as to bow down to him before he could even speak, even getting down on his hands and knees. Iida started, "Kirishima. I was foolish the other night." The redhead gave him a startled look. "I cannot condone what I said nor can I act as though nothing was wrong. What I said was unforgivable and ignorant. I should have known better than to speak ill of anyone. I know asking for forgiveness is the last thing you want to hear, but do know I am sorry." Still shocked by the unexpected apology, Kirishima remained silent. He wasn't expecting the bowing or for Iida to make fun of himself, but he also wasn't expecting that he wouldn't do it. He knew he had said some offensive things the other night and regretted them, and the memory of it made him wince. Kirishima rubbed the back of his head and remarked, "It's okay, man. It wasn't like I said anything great last night either." However, a frown quickly appeared on his face. "It's just because someone doesn't have power or anything like that, doesn't mean they deserve to be treated less for it, ya know." "Yes. I wholeheartedly agree with you." Kirishima glanced at the explosive user and remarked, "Even so, I don't know if I can forget about what you and Bakugo said. After last night and the way he was going to attack Midoriya, he wasn't sure if he wanted to try to be his friend, even though at first he thought he was a little manly. But I've never been one to hold a grudge either. Besides, I can tell by looking at you that you can't lie at all. It would be very unbecoming of me to do so." With a shark-like grin, Kirishima held out a hand and said, "Well, let's just start over. Ejiro Kirishima, pleased to meet you." They shook hands, and Iida smiled slightly and said, "Iida Tenya, a pleasure." At least it was a beginning. A little drool was trickling down Mineta's chin as he smiled from ear to ear. His luck was unbelievable. The girls' locker room was on the opposite side of the damn hole he discovered. He froze as he turned to call the nearest person to join in. Looking down at him, he was now staring into Rukido's heartless glare. With a trace of fear in his voice, Mineta said, Hey? Wanna join? He responded with a hard axe kick to the top of his head, which did not cause any significant harm but also did not knock him out. He felt himself lifted off the ground and flung into the lockers, where he lay in terror as the living grape moaned on the floor. Rukido gave him a stern look, then sighed to himself, turned to the peephole, and knocked on the wall. Rukido said calmly, aware that she could hear them, "Hey Jiro? I'm sure you and the others heard Mineta, along with the whole peephole. Be sure to cover it up then tell Mr. Aizawa about it. I'll stand here and watch over the rotten grape." Side of the girls, Jiro, like the other girls who had heard Mineta's yelling, couldn't help but frown. They were grateful that the small grape had been discovered, though. Momo made a pack of tape and said, "Leave me to do this." She could only sigh as she easily sealed up the hole. "We should report this immediately." Asui questioned, "The hole or Mineta?" Jiro added, still irritated by the grappist, "Yes, that was sticking, both preferably. Still, we must thank Sato for catching him and warning us as well," Momo concluded, "though I am surprised that UA allowed such a thing to go unnoticed." Asui remarked, "Perhaps one of the other classes left it." Momo said, "It seems likely. Anyway," Mina said, shifting the topic, "Mr. Aizawa is a jerk." Mina. With her arms crossed in a sigh, the pink girl exclaimed, "What? I'm not wrong." With a slight shiver, Toru said, "Sorry Momo, but I have to agree, in her opinion, she was much too close to being 20. I was so scared." "Ah. It's okay." Mina reassured the girl, giving her a hug. "The mean caterpillar man won't bother you anytime soon." Taya, who has so far found him trustworthy, remarked, "Even though I do find his method unorthodox, I feel as though we won't be failing in heroics anytime soon with someone like. He will certainly push us towards our limits." Uraraka said, sulking a little as she recalled their teacher, "I guess you're right. He was authentic." Room of Rukido, Heights Alliance. While Ship lay on his stomach, Rukido yawned and stared up at the ceiling, bored to death. The others, who had been thoroughly worn out by the quirk test, were still unwinding. He turned to face the silver and red object on the nightstand, which was still lifeless and drab. He shut off the light beside him, sighed, and stroked Ship's head before closing his eyes and letting himself fall asleep. Where had he gone? Give it. Who was that? Give it. Which is my rightfully, right now? A bright red light soon engulfed Rukido, and he could not move when he saw a pair of glowing red eyes in the darkness. The real world. Rukido's eyes popped open as he sat up in a cold sweat, clutching his chest to keep his breathing under control after his abrupt awakening, and he exhaled a sigh of relief when he looked down at the Omnitrix and stared at it for what seemed like centuries. He wasn't going to get any sleep or an answer anytime soon. Homeroom, UA University. When it came to teaching both normal and heroic students, UA University paid close attention. Quirk history, language classes, mathematics, and the fundamentals were among the subjects covered in class. But they were all waiting for one particular class. The trial of battle. Not because of the actual class, but rather because of the gossip about their teacher. Furthermore, that is none other than All Might yelled, "I am here," as he entered the classroom. He was dressed in a Silver Age outfit, coming through the door like a normal person. All Might. The majority of the class cried in surprise and delight. Given how busy he appeared to be, All Might was the last person they anticipated to be their teacher out of all the rumors. For them, it was simply awesome. Kaminari grinned broadly and remarked, "I can't believe it's really All Might." The shark-like smile on Kirishima's face said, "This year is gonna be awesome." Taya shined resolutely and exclaimed, "I want to face him." Asui shivered and remarked, "Isn't that his Silver Age costume? I'm getting goosebumps just looking at it." With the exception of a few, almost all of the students had left comments about All Might. Rukido thought, staring boredly at the blonde hero, "Wow, they're really going crazy over this guy." "Welcome to the most important course at UA. Heroics 101. All Might yelled, his fist resting on his hips. "Here you will know the basics of being a pro and what it means to fight for the name of good. Let's get into today's lesson and pull no punches. Today we'll be doing battle training." With piercing smiles, the Bakugo twins cried out, "Battle. Real combat training." Izuku muttered. He was genuinely anxious to use his quirk because he still didn't have a firm grasp on it. He was also opposed to fighting Katsuki. However, one thing is important when it comes to heroism. Looking good. All Might yelled at the students in a dramatic manner. "Your costumes await within your lockers, based on what you've asked for and based around your quirk itself. Head out as soon as I leave to get them and head for training ground beta." "Yes, sir," shouted the entire class. All Might gave a nod before leaving the classroom, his smile never wavering or fading. As All Might walked away, Galva remarked, "That's Justice's ass." Kaminari said with a stern expression of disgust, "Dude, that's nasty. He didn't need that mental picture." Mina grinned broadly and said, "No, he's right, he's totally got the ass of Justice." With shame evident on her face, Momo said, Please refrain from speaking about All Might in such a manner." Iida made his hand chop motion and yelled, "Galva, Mina, do not speak of our teachers in such a way." But Galva simply laughed it off and began slapping his own leg at the mayhem that resulted. But he froze as a cold chill ran through his very being and he felt a firm grip on his shoulder. Fearfully, he turned his head and saw a stony-faced Taya standing in front of him. Hey Taya. His doom was symbolized by a glowing purple eye that said, "You are being most improper, for that I think you need punishment." Wait. Too late. I.e. Having just left the classroom, All Might thought, these kids certainly are vocal. There was a slight flush on his face now, and his smile was a little forced. But there was one thing he had to acknowledge. He had the ass of Justice, for sure, observation room, ground beta training. Currently dressed in their individual costumes, Class 1A was gathered around the room. It was simple, extravagant, or just plain informal. When All Might saw Izuku's attire, he couldn't help but laugh because it so obviously resembled him. That or a bunny, maybe. Galva's ensemble, which included a black shirt, a dark red hooded jacket with a white stripe on the right side, denim jeans, and red and white sneakers, fell into the casual category. Unlike some of the others, he didn't really need support equipment because of his quirk. Taya herself stood out a little more. She was dressed in skin-tight black pants, dark purple boots with black braces, and a black, sleeveless corset that let her wings show out the back. To her dismay, she was not yet permitted to possess the sword that she had initially desired. Katsumi was dressed in dark green combat pants, black battle boots, and a tight black tank top with an orange X on the back. Two dark green and black gauntlets, like miniature grenades, were on her hands. She had hers made smaller, with a double barrel just above her knuckle, in contrast to her brother's enormous ones. Mineta said, "Hey, looking good," as he approached the girls, but a tail slammed down directly in front of him. He looked up into the glaring group of women in front of him and gulped. With a blank expression on her face, Asui remarked, "We know what you tried doing." Mineta opened his mouth to say, What do you mean?" But the door slammed open and hit him in the face. Rukido, now dressed in his costume, said, "Oh, not sorry." Wearing a basic black t-shirt, black cargo pants, green combat boots, and brown gloves was fairly basic. In addition, he wore a long, tattered green scarf around his neck and a black vest with a white stripe running down the back. At last, he was holding a silver board that said, "Yo." Glancing down at the grape, Galva exclaimed, "Sup? Oh dude, you messed up Mineta." Rukido walked over to a wall and leaned against it, saying, "He's still alive." Galva grinned broadly and exclaimed, "So, what's with the board? I already know it's techie. I mean, not as impressive as your watch, but still pretty cool. Just the only item that got approved. I need to wait for something else, but given how long that may take, I'm gonna have toy deal." Rukido replied without much concern. "Also, appreciate the casual look you got going on. Makes more sense than a jumpsuit." Galva exclaimed with pride, "Right, besides with my quirk, I don't really need any support item. I would at least have something on hand just in case," Rukido replied. Galva ignored the deadpanned look he was receiving and waved him away, saying, "Nah, I'll be fine. Man, I can't wait to start up. Hey, which transformation are you gonna use?" Rukido said, disregarding the situation, "I have no clue, maybe I won't use one." As they turned to face Tokiyami, they asked, "Is that wise? It wouldn't be beneficial to you to not use everything at your disposal?" As if it were easy, Rukido clarified, "Fair, but if I don't use a form, then I can deal with my weakness a lot easier." Galva cocked his head in perplexity, but Tokiyami appeared to comprehend. What was the nature of Rukido's weakness? "Just who are you, Rukido Sato?" Looking over at the so-called quirkless child, All Might thought, grinning strangely. He had a lot of faith in Nezu, but he wasn't entirely convinced that Rukido wasn't quirkless. It is inconceivable that such abilities could be contained in a watch of all things. However, unless he is concealing something, he shouldn't have any justification for lying about a quirk either. Even though he didn't want to consider it, especially for a student of his, he couldn't shake his suspicion. He couldn't help but think of one man because he had so many powers that seemed to have no boundaries. But he dismissed that thought. As far as he was concerned, he had ended that man. Nobody ever had to be afraid of him again. He would, however, continue to watch, just in case. All Might pulled out his phone and said, "Today we will be starting battle training. These classes will involve real-life scenarios where you will be paired with a partner to go against the enemy team. Lucky for me, I found an app to pair you together randomly." The class's collective answer was, "An app?" As they watched the hero struggle with the phone, they were expecting something more, but nobody spoke. It was almost funny. Indeed, now teams will be made within pairs of two. One team will act as villains, defending a bomb from the hero team, whose job is to stop it. Villains win by either defeating the heroes or by making sure the bomb remains untouched. Heroes win by defeating the villains or simply touching the bomb. At the end we will discuss the results of who is the MVP of the game. All Might perfectly clarified. Knowing full well that his memory wasn't the best when it came to teaching, he was actually reading the details off his phone. Now, any questions? Can we grab anywhere we want? How badly can we damage our opponents? What else shall we be learning from this course? All Might, rapidly irritated by the class and their inquiries, exclaimed, "Yeesh, enough, too many questions at once. Now then, let's randomize these fights. Tsuyu Asui and Tenya Iida versus Rukido Sato and Kirishima." Just as Rukido and Kirishima were about to fall to the ground, All Might called out to them. "Ah, young Sato. A word if you don't mind." Stunned, Kirishima said, "Dude, All Might wants to talk with you." Rukido replied, "Yeah, he's great, go on ahead." The transforming student turned to All Might as the red-themed student nodded and continued walking. "Is there a problem, sir?" "Nothing of the sort. I only wanted to make sure you use one of your forms before starting," the instructor replied. Rukido saw the tense smile he was getting and responded, "Only if I need to, sir." All Might stated, "If only to make the point. Now. You should use everything at your disposal in order to win. Besides, your power will be needed in order to become a full-fledged hero. It would be impossible to do so without it. In that case, answer this. What is important for heroes to have, power or spirit? While it may seem sad, power is necessary in becoming a hero. A spirit may be nice, but without power, you won't cut it as a hero. And my disappointment in you is immeasurable." "Huh?" Rukido questioned with a hint of sarcasm. "You're one of those, you cannot be a hero without a quirk, types, right? Honestly, you act as though having a quirk is a guarantee to being a hero and believe when I say that is bullshit." With a more serious expression, All Might said, "Language young Sato. In my experience, there has never been a quirkless hero and I doubt there ever will be. If they wish to do something similar, then they can easily become police or firemen. It's just a world fact that you created and others had created when it shouldn't matter regardless. Anyone that puts in the hard work and effort can save a life if they're determined to do so." Rukido replied with a look of annoyance. All Might appeared to agree, crossing his arms and grinning strangely. "Now if you don't mind, Mr. Number 1, I got a match to win." All Might could only watch Rukido glare at his pupil as he left. He has endured just as much suffering as young Midoriya. And myself, if he is quirkless. Rukido, meanwhile, managed to catch up to Kirishima before All Might entered the intercom. "You have 5 minutes of prep time, use it wisely and remember, use everything at your disposal. We'll also be listening in on what you're saying, so everyone can judge you." Curious, Kirishima inquired, "So how was your talk with All Might? Was he giving you good luck or something like that?" Rukido parted his lips to reply, then shut them. He wasn't the biggest fan of All Might right now, but he also wasn't the type to discuss his feelings with Kirishima. The man was regarded by many as the world's greatest hero because of his strength, achievements, and general capacity to save lives. By no means did he wish to ruin Kirishima's perception of the man. Rukido wanted to shift the conversation, so he said, "It was something. Anyway, we should make a plan." But Kirishima was more excited than anything. "Right, I say we rush in there and take them down before they even get the chance to attack," she concluded. "Maybe let's not do that." "Huh? Why not? We're meant to treat this as a simulated event of the real deal." "Well, the real deal wouldn't be just us and them, there would be potential hostages as well, the chance of there being a trigger device that can set off the deceive early or something as simple as firearms as well. We clearly don't have to worry about that kind of stuff, but we can't treat this as if it were just a game either." Rukido clarified, making sure he understood. "Therefore, we have to play this out as if it were realistic and rushing in, guns blazing won't cut it." Kirishima scribbled the side of his check in shame and said, "Oh, alright. I guess I should have thought of that." As the red-themed student turned to face him and noticed the broad smile on his face as he held up the silverboard, Rukido said, "Don't worry yourself about it, that's just how I'm looking at things. Now, tell me, Kirishima, are you ready to be a hero?" He received a shark-like smile in return. Observation room. Begin. All Might yelled into the microphone, signaling the start of the match. Eager and concerned at the same time, he and the students were seated in the front row for the fight. Gazing up at the screen, Jiro muttered, "Man, they're toast." Momo said, Which team?" Jiro stated, as though it were that easy, "Tenya and Asui, they're against Rukido of all people." Kaminari remarked, "I mean, they stand a chance, don't they?" Mineta laughed and joked, "Yeah, you make it sound like Rukido is the strongest in our class." Observing the screen, Taya muttered, "She may be right." She recalled the quirk test's numerous transformations, each with its own special set of powers. Furthermore, if Galva was right, he had a lot more in store. Without a doubt, he is incredible. Regarding the strongest, that's probably pretty accurate. Galva yelled, Wait, what's he do? No way," as stars appeared in his eyes. "That looks like so much fun." Ochako's star-like eyes conveyed her excitement. When Momo said, That's amazing," she was in complete shock. Zone of battle test. In a fit of laughter, Iida yelled, "Muh ha 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 ha. I have embraced Villainism to the highest degree. Fear me, for I have become the highest degree of a villain. Outside the insane asylum." Asui found it less than amusing and gave the typically strict boy a deadpan look. Unfortunately, the frog girl did not interrupt Iida's performance when she said, "You're taking this way too seriously." Since confronting their enemies head-on would, at best, be disastrous, they had made the decision to stick with the bomb. If they were lucky, she would be able to use her camouflage over the main entrance to surprise them. "We have nothing to fear, my minion? For we have the element of surprise on our side," Iida exclaimed, ignoring the irritated look that was directed at him. "No doubt they will be coming through that very door and fall into our diabolical trap." Asui decided not to answer and turned to face the room's sole entrance, but as she turned to face the window in trance, her eyes widened and she heard a warping sound. On a hoverboard, Rukido and Kirishima were soaring through the air. As in, "What? Ho ho ho, it seems that you have entered my lair, heroes. Prepare to face the wrath of Oof." The hoverboard crashed into Iida, sending him flying across the room, and the hero team leapt off. After landing on the ground, they both ran directly for the bomb, but Kirishima was encircled by a long tongue. The hardened user cried out, "What the woe?" as he was thrown off his feet and smashed into a wall. Fortunately, he avoided going through it or into it, and he was ready to move when he heard an engine. As the engine user closed in on Kirishima, Rukido heard it too, just avoiding Iida's speeding figure. Iida kicked him in the chest, sending him crashing into the wall as the red hero swiftly triggered his quirk. Kirishima snarled as he attempted to exit but was unsuccessful. He was stranded. Before he stopped and extended his hand to grasp Asui's long tongue, Rukido was walking in the direction of the bomb. "Not bad, but I've faced better frogs than you." Rukido yanked Asui off the ceiling and forced her to turn off her camouflage by yanking her tongue. She landed on her feet quickly after he threw her over his shoulder. Asui spun around to confront him and kicked him, but it was caught before she could get off her feet and was flung. Iida closed at the same moment and kicked Rukido, but it was swiftly deflected as he was now well beyond his opponent. Asui jumped back at Rukido, yanking him back before he could move, her tongue out and now wrapped around his wrist. But just as she was about to kick him, he lifted his arms and just managed to block it before pushing her back, causing her to land on her feet. He turned as he heard the sound of an engine and saw Iida approaching him again for another kick. Rukido had moved around him this time and slammed a palm into his back. Iida stumbled forward as a result, almost bringing Asui to the ground. After evading him, the frog decided to attempt striking the student who was changing. At least she was preventing it from moving closer to the bomb, even though she wasn't exactly hitting it. After swiftly dodging a punch and kicking beneath her feet, Rukido remarked, "Not half bad, though you may want to incorporate more knockovers and kicks into your style." But rather than falling to the ground, she had leapt back, and his face showed surprise. "Not bad." Iida yelled, "Have it, the hero," and ran again toward Rukido. Kirishima, meanwhile, was still wedged into the wall and had to observe the altercation. Kirishima strained to escape his position, attempting to tear himself free. Come on, but before he could disable his quirk, He paused and stared at his arms for what seemed like an eternity. He managed to smirk as he slipped through the wall, though it wasn't much. All right, now I got this. While the villain team was attempting to keep Rukido away from the bomb, he wasted no time in hurrying towards them. He roared and threw his arms out, tackling Asui and Iida and sending them hard to the ground. They made a hasty attempt to flee, but Kirishima used his quirk and tightened his hold on them. He looked up and shouted, "I got them! Go!" Rukido ran to the bomb and exclaimed, "Way ahead of you, Red!" Kirishima pushed Asui back down, causing her to miss by a few inches as she raised her head to the right and let go of her tongue to grab the hero member. As the timer sounded, Rukido tapped the bomb and could only smile, and that is that. Hero team wins. All Might declared over the announcement system. Kirishima let them go and got to her feet, leaving Asui with nothing to do but sigh. Kirishima assisted her in standing up and said, "Hey, sorry about that." Simply put, Asui said, "It's fine." Iida, meanwhile, was on his knees and his helmet was leaking tears. As everyone gawked at him, he yelled, "Curses," into the ceiling. Observation room. Upon returning to the observation, both teams received commendation for their diligent efforts. Rukido himself, hoverboard in hand, just scratched his cheek as he went by them. Galva quickly materialized in front of him, her eyes glimmering blue with anticipation. With great excitement, the nanite user exclaimed, Please let me scan that with my quirk. I got a hoverbike down, but I can't figure out a hoverboard." Pressing a button on the board, Rukido remarked, I'll think about it." He put it on his belt after it folded back into a flat, round piece. He couldn't resist asking their teacher as he turned to face them. "How'd we do, Mr. Might?" All Might reprimanded him before shrugging his shoulders. "You did quite well, but you could have done more. You held back by not using your watch, and in a real-life scenario, you place lives at risk. Just because I have the watch, doesn't mean I have to use it every second I get. Besides, this is the first training exam, so I wasn't going to take it too seriously." Rukido was pointing to his watch. "Heck, with XLR8 I could have easily ended that test in seconds." "And you didn't, for what reason?" Rukido glared at the number 1 hero and crossed his arms, saying, "My biggest weakness is myself. If I can't defend myself without my watch, then I would be in trouble. Isn't it important for a hero to realize their weakness and how to deal with them?" Despite his apparent annoyance at the response, All Might took note of his students' facial expressions. He could see that, with the exception of a few, they were considering their own weaknesses and how to address them. Even though he had different opinions about how to handle weaknesses, he was ultimately unable to deny that he was correct in doing so. A brief lesson sprang to mind, and All Might thought, at least the other students had a chance to go at it. He then put on his smile. "A good answer, young Sato. There may be times where your quirk may be useless in a situation. Therefore you will be learning on how to deal with that weakness while you're here." As the hero announced the next team, Rukido rolled his eyes at him and turned back to the wall. Fumikage Tokayami and Kyoka Jiro versus Mezzo Shoji and Minoru Mineta. Fukiyami's team will be heroes while Mezzo's will be villains, announced All Might. The battle zone, Mineta and Mezzo were both protecting the bomb, with the grape boy scattering several sticky balls on the floors and doors. Mezzo had been grateful for his assistance, despite his perverted streak and bleeding scalp. But he could live without his chattering. Mineta looked at the entrance and said out loud, "How unlucky can I be? First I'm not paired with one of the hot chicks." He held his hand under his chin. "I mean, I would have taken Momo's large breast, Asui's long legs, Mina's exotic skin, Uraraka's large ass, Teia's unique features, Toru's naked body. Any of them. Especially if they were on the villain team." Mineta went on louder than ever, "Then I could grab anywhere I want without getting in trouble for it," her next words. In fact, Mezzo was having trouble hearing anything outside. "Of course all we get is the flat-chested tomboy. She's got nothing going on for her." Mineta. "Really? Why am I hated by the universe?" Mineta exclaimed to the top of his lungs. Mezzo was about to say something before the wall across from them suddenly busted wide open. What in the hem? Soon after, a shadowy claw emerged from the exposed wall, seized Mineta by the head, and threw him directly into the bomb. Mezzo had ducked to avoid the claw as Tokiyami entered, and Jiro quickly followed, running into the room with a look of rage on her face. When Mezzo saw this, he made a beeline for Jiro to attack, but Dark Shadow blocked his path. With a loud caw, it advanced to use its claws to attack the multi-armed student, only to have them blocked by Mezzo's own hands. Despite the multi-armed student's struggles, he was able to push Dark Shadow back before striking the Dark Entity with all of his strength, sending the sentient quirk back towards Tokiyami before fully recovering and now yelling at him. Mineta, meanwhile, had barely recovered, mumbling incoherently as he saw the raging form of Jiro approaching him. In a state of extreme panic, he started tearing balls from his head and throwing them at the punk-themed heroine, screaming to the top of his lungs and ignoring the pain he was experiencing. However, his aim was wildly inaccurate, missing every shot as Jiro quickly closed in on him and clonked him across his head. Mineta could only yelp as Jiro started jabbing him quickly with her earjacks, unable to defend himself from her ferocious attack. This prompted Mezzo to push Dark Shadow away and knock it and Tokiyami back into a wall. The Shadow Bird user moaned and then saw Mezzo approaching Jiro and Mineta. Jiro. The bomb. Fortunately, he was heard when Jiro stopped attacking the Grappist and ran to the bomb as Mezzo approached. She had just managed to tap the bomb with an outstretched hand before Mezzo stopped right behind her, realizing he had lost. The hero team triumphs. All Might declared with pride, and while Tokiyami hummed in relief, Mezzo could only sigh. Jiro was in the same boat, but she was much happier about the damage she had caused to Grappist than she was about winning. Mineta, well, after the first few blows, he passed out. Observation room. Congratulations to all. You clearly gave this battle your all. With that, Mineta will be in the nurse's office until the end of the day, All Might said, giving Jiro a sidelong glance without even displaying remorse. But enough of that. Oh, it's time for the next game. This is going to be a very exciting event. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the board, anticipating the next battle. Taya Nightingale and Mina Ishido versus Momo Yaoyorozu and Katsumi Bakugo. As everyone could almost hear the war drums blaring in the background, Katsumi's eyes glowed with excitement and Taya's smirked with curiosity. All Might pondered how much damage was going to be done and thought, ha ha. This fight will certainly be explosive. They might need another building. Katsumi Bakugo and Momo Yaoyorozu versus Mina and Taya Nightingale. One exit remained, and Katsumi stood in front of it as Momo approached her. Momo hummed to herself as she put up the final barriers for the entrances before turning to see Katsumi's progress and being grateful that she appeared more willing to help than her brother might be, despite the fact that she was quiet about it, primarily because of her own plan. While Katsumi sucked her teeth, Momo remarked, although I would prefer us to stay together, I understand why one of us should go on the offensive. The other teams lost because they believed it would be best to stick with the bomb. Remembering how the two villain teams failed, one failing to pay attention to one of the members, and the other being wiped out in less than a minute, Katsumi remarked, I'll take Pinky and Draco for myself. Dumbasses didn't think what would happen if they got overrun within the first second. Ponytail, you make sure this place remains sealed. Nicknames? Momo asked herself, unsure of whether to be pleased to have been given one or perplexed by the moniker. And if one of them gets by you, be sure to contact me via radio. TCH, they won't get by me. Bakugo-san, please, we shouldn't take this lightly, Momo said gravely, halting her in her tracks. Even in the case of an exam, anything can occur. Before she could finish, Katsumi said, yeah, I'm going as soon as All Might gives the call. She wasn't going to be cocky, at least not this much. Understood. And give me the name Katsumi. For me, none of the san stuff. Obviously. And get going. Momo was left to deal with the bomb while Katsumi was off like a bat out of hell. Traveling throughout the building was their safest bet to win, and Taya was leading the way with Mina at her side as they ran up the floors. The idea of flight was mentioned, but Taya brushed it off as too obvious and that she and Mina could be blown out of the sky with ease. Sue, are you interested? Mina inquired, striking up a discussion. Without turning to face Mina, Taya said, swords, movies, dragons, plushies. Mina pouted and was about to ask for more when the dragoness grabbed her, causing her to yell as they leapt back, with Taya growling as an explosion struck her back and knocked them to the ground. Damn it all. With a crazy smile on her face and standing across from them, Katsumi said, looks like I found you. Taya narrowed her eyes and got to her feet, and Mina did the same, both of them shocked by the attack. TCH. With her wings spread wide, Taya declared, you won't give me any trouble. Ha. Scales, we'll see about that. Katsumi declared before blasting herself at the dragoness. Lifting her wings up, Taya planned to protect herself from the blast only for the explosive user to suddenly blast herself over her. Instead she was aiming right for Mina, who was left wide open as Katsumi lunged at her. Get over here, Pinky. No, thank you. Mina, who had just about rolled out of the explosion's path, cried out. When Katsumi saw something gray flying at her, she gritted her teeth and grabbed the ground to stop herself. She jumped back and watched as the gray liquid burned the ground, noting the acid power, but before she could think further, she was slammed into a wall by a truck and moaned before feeling a foot against her neck as Taya pinned her in place. The dragoness applied pressure and said, "You are done here." She turned to face Mina as she stood up and said, "Get to the bomb, I shall handle her." "You got it." Before fleeing from the two, Mina said. Katsumi growled and slowly reached up for the earpiece, pressing it quickly. "Gosh, Pinky got past me." She screamed as Taya reached down and used her hand to smash her earpiece, but Katsumi grabbed her arm and detonated an explosion strong enough to push her back at the same moment. The dragoness gritted her teeth as Katsumi continued to throw punch after punch, each one exploding on impact. With Taya making clicking noises from his gauntlets, she leapt to her feet and made a tight fist. Kasumi charged at the dragoness, reeling a fist back while Taya crossed her arms to block it. A powerful, explosive impact was released as the fist into her arms forced Taya to slide back. Observation room. Gauntlets that are explosive. That's fantastic. With stars in their eyes, Kaminari and Galva yelled. Jiro muttered, "Yeesh," when you think they couldn't get any louder. "I'm so relieved that I don't have to disagree with her," Toru let out a cry. "You realize that you might have to deal with her later on, don't you?" Sato was compelled to draw attention to it. "I didn't need to hear that from you." With arms raised in utter terror and anxiety, Toru cried out. "Sorry," Izuku thought. "Wow, she's amazing," as he watched them battle on the screen, but a frown quickly appeared on his face. But Taya is holding her own. Her scales seem to be enough to tank on Sumi's normal explosions. The ones she's firing now are far more consecutive, but much weaker in order to keep up with that consecutiveness in order to not damage her gauntlets. If she wants to win, then she'll need to change up her style quickly. Katsuki, who was scoffing at the battle from a distance, smiled maniacally as he looked down at his own gauntlets. He wasn't impressed by Taya yet and thought he could defeat her. He couldn't wait to try them. Zone of battle test. Mina had arrived at the last floor while Taya and Katsumi were fighting, and she wasted no time in making her way to the entrance in the hopes of reaching the bomb and winning with a simple touch. She stopped short, peeked inside to check on Momo, and saw a shield swinging towards her head. She rolled over the ground, lunged forward to avoid the shield, and began to run for the bomb, but something wrapped around her arm and stopped her. She turned to see Momo standing near the door with a whip and shield in her hands. "Pardon me, Mina." Mina decided she had other ideas, though, and as she got closer to Momo, she suddenly ran for the creator girl, jumped on her shield, and performed a perfect flip over her, yanking the whip with all her strength as she fell to the ground, effectively forcing Momo off her feet and onto the ground while she had landed perfectly on her feet. Momo had pulled the alien girl back, intending to slam her shield into her face. "Dancing has advantages." "You got it, Momo," Mina declared as she took out some capture tape. However, Momo suddenly lifted off the ground while creating a riot shotgun, aiming it right at the pink-skinned girl. "Wait, Gak, hold on." As she tried to return home, Mina could only whimper in mild pain as she clutched onto her stomach after a beanbag round slammed into it and sent her flying back into the wall. However, she soon discovered that her hands were wrapped together when she looked down and saw the capture tape surrounding them. Mina let out a loud groan as Momo smiled apologetically. Below, Taya snarled as she dodged one of Katsumi's blows, then delivered her own uppercut to the girl's stomach, causing her to gasp in agony before being knocked away by Taya's tail and colliding with the wall. The dragoness moved swiftly to seize one of her gauntlets, tearing it from her hands and crushing it in the process, but she was blasted back slightly and received a full-blown explosion in her side. "You will be held accountable for that." She intended to hold the dragoness accountable because she was furious about one of her gauntlets breaking. She blasted herself off the ground, flew at Taya, and then rolled off her, clotheslining into the ground hard. Pulling a small handle on her remaining gauntlet, Katsumi aimed it down at Taya and fired an explosive shell, which was designed for more direct, long-range attacks and withheld a small amount of power because it had previously been filled with a certain amount. Katsumi continued to back away as she fired at Taya, who was just starting to stand up. The dragoness jumped back up after being shot in the head, which caused her to take a step back. Her eyes glowed purple as she raised her head and charged at Katsumi, sidestepping the explosive shots that were coming at her. Once she had closed in, she slammed her elbow into Katsumi's neck, pinning her to the wall. The explosive girl had to halt her attack as she struggled to escape the wall, only to find her gauntleted arm pinned to the wall as well, now crushed by Taya's hand. "Just a little bit longer." Katsumi was surprised by the girl's strength, but she wasn't one to play around either. She blasted the wall behind her with her free hand, and both she and Taya fell back into it as she kicked Taya over and away from her, landing on her feet and giving the dragoness a dark purplish aura around her. Katsumi, meanwhile, was getting back up and glaring up at Taya, while she saw the menacing aura around the dragon, popping explosions in her hands as she waited for the next move. Before long, a big piece of debris fell between them, and Taya immediately took off at Katsumi. The explosive girl gritted her teeth as she brought her hands up to fire an explosion before. Time's up. The villain team wins. Katsumi halted her own attack, lowering her hands and frowning as All Might abruptly announced, and Taya lost her aura as she slowed herself down with her wings. Knew it was only a matter of time. 5 minutes isn't enough time for the heroes to relax. Holding off Scales was more important. However, Katsumi thought as she glanced at Taya, who was letting out a disappointed sigh. Scales is way stronger than I gave her credit for. Even with my gauntlets, I barely made her flinch. TCH. I won't be caught off guard next time. One way or another, I'll beat you with my own power. She will admit that she felt a little intimidated by the dragoness's power, tanking explosions, being physically stronger, being faster, and having that strange aura she had. But she was filled with excitement and anticipation instead of doubts. If there was anything she enjoyed doing, it was defeating stronger people. Whether it was through feats or sheer strength, it didn't matter to her as long as she could prove her value to the world. Hi, Scales. When Taya turned around, she saw Katsumi's resolute glare. Next time, don't expect a timer to break up our fight. No matter what, I'm going to defeat you. When Katsumi saw it, she scoffingly laughed, but she let a smirk stay on her face. I look forward to it, Bakugo-chan. Taya said, a soft smile spreading across her face. They had created a rivalry. Now hurry back. We need to start up other matches. Galva Solaris and Toru Hagakure vs Shoko Todoroki and Rikido Sato. As he watched Shoko seal off the entrance to the bomb area, Sato couldn't help but perspire. He couldn't lie. He felt fortunate to be paired with someone as strong as her rather than against her, but he couldn't help but find her aloof and cold demeanor a little annoying. But when they prevailed, he could handle it. So, what's the strategy? Sato inquired. Shoko started to move forward, freezing the layout around her while creating a path for Sato to walk on. Just stay out of my way and I'll freeze them solid. Right on, Sato said quickly while walking alongside her. They strolled in silence, trying to find Galva and Toru, but to no avail. They could be flying up. No, that room was frozen solid by me. Without even glancing in his direction, the ice girl remarked, I want to end this fast however, so taking them out as soon as possible will be beneficial. Because the ice was so hard and the entire room was now a giant ice cube, it would take an eternity to enter the room. We would have heard Galva attempting it by now. Sato said, unconcerned, if you say so. So, how? With a big smile on his face and his giant metal fist out, Galva leapt through the wall next to them, causing it to suddenly burst open. Oh yeah. TCH. To her surprise, Shoko unleashed a broad wave of ice in front of them to protect themselves, but it was quickly destroyed. I got him, said Sato, who stepped forward and stopped the metal fist in its tracks by matching it with his own. But Galva was prepared because his leg quickly changed into the same metal, and he kicked Sato, sending him crashing back into a wall. Galva declared, ha ha, gotcha, as he swung toward Shoko. But his arm hit the ground after being frozen by a wave of ice. Oh come on. Shoko was about to freeze him when Sato hurried past her, saying, you talk too much. As she watched Sato give Galva a stomach uppercut, she gritted her teeth in annoyance. That idiot is interfering. With a roar, Sato lowered his hands to Galva's head, then grabbed it and slammed his knee into his face. Before he stopped himself, the tech-themed student took a few steps back. The sugar user dashed forward to strike once more, only to be ensnared in a whip that resembled bluish material. Galva then leapt at him once more and stomped on him with his giant metal boots after he had been thrown over and smashed against a wall. Galva said, hell yeah, as he reabsorbed his parts. He chuckled and nervously rubbed the back of his head when he saw that Sato was unconscious. Aw man, I think I overdid it. What do you blah? His response was a wave of ice. He coated his hand in metal, then broke the ice holding him, rolling his eyes as he looked down at his now frozen feet. But just as he did, a pillar of ice struck his stomach, pushing him back. Galva swiftly formed his metal fist and smashed it to pieces as Shoko released another wave of ice. He leapt at the Ice Queen with the big fist and swung to attack, only to strike a wall of ice instead. Galva snarled, "Really?" as he punched through the ice again, with Shoko standing on the other side of him. "Come on now. Ice Queen versus Super Robot." No, she sent out another blast of ice, which made the hallway completely icy. Galva's entire body was frozen solid as he was immediately captured. When Shoko came up to him, he was unable to even talk. "Now remain here as I." "You're mine, Eep." Toru, who had remained hidden during the fight, had attempted to attack Shoko from behind with an ice block she had picked up, only to be instantly frozen in place. As the intercom came on, Shoko watched Toru shiver in the ice block with no remorse at all. Villains win. With Shoko humming to herself, All Might declared, "Todoroki-chan, please unfreeze your classmates and let the medic bots take them." After a moment of hesitation, Shoko nodded and put a hand on Toru, melting her. "I hate this power." Observation room. Izuku swallowed when he realized his situation. There were only 4 people left, so he would either be with Katsuki or against him, both of which would end badly, and he had hardly looked at his old friend before, flinching violently at the crazed smile that was directed at him. Zuku. He turned around to see Katsumi's anxious face, and even she wasn't sure what to do for him. She opened her mouth to say something, then shut it. Don't worry about me, Sumi," Izuku said, grabbing her attention. "I'll beat him myself, so don't worry about me, all right?" Although she wished it had happened much, much later, the explosive girl appeared more anxious than ever before and wished that this fight would never occur, even though it was unavoidable in the end. Just be safe. Whether you defeat him or not is irrelevant. The best he could do was to say, I'll try. Next up, Ochako Uraraka and Katsuki Bakugo vs Izuku Midoriya and Denki Kaminari. "Remember, 5 minutes of prep before the fight," All Might declared, oblivious to the intense bloodlust in Katsuki's eyes and the overwhelming fear in Izuku's. "All right. I got rid of the guy who can punch a huge robot. I'm completely safe," Kaminari boasted as he swung an arm around Izuku, who laughed a little, uncertain of his chances of winning. But damn it, he was going to try. The battle zone. Izuku and Kaminari were the hero team, while Katsuki and Uraraka were the villain team. The match was just started by All Might, which let the 2 teams battle it out. Kaminari was just leading the way, while Izuku was keeping a close eye out for Katsuki. "So, what is going on between Bakugo and you?" Kaminari inquired abruptly. Izuku swallowed, unsure of what to say. "You act as though you wouldn't harm a fly, but everyone in the class can see that guy has a hate boner for you." "I don't mean to offend," Kaminari said hastily. "It's a little personal between Katsuki and me, but nothing taken." Izuku quickly apologized, not wanting to be impolite, but he hadn't known Kaminari for very long and wasn't going to reveal too much too quickly. Kaminari shrugged and said, "I get it, man, you don't gotta explain it." Izuku was about to say something else when his gaze was drawn to something. "Come on down." Looking up, he saw Katsuki's battle-ready form smirking at them after Izuku knocked Kaminari and himself out of the way of an explosive palm. He was so certain that he would win that he wasn't even shouting, "Time to die, shit nerd." His tone was devoid of any concern. Kaminari was on the ground, still trembling from almost being hit by the explosion, but he quickly straightened out when he saw Izuku get up, still shaking but holding his fist up. He stood up as well, feeling the perspiration trickle down his face before wiping it away as the lights came on all around him. Kaminari said, "Well, let's get it on. Would you please just give up, Sparky?" Katsuki said carelessly, "I'm here for Deku, and I don't need your ass getting in my way." To the surprise of the 2, Izuku said, "Kaminari, leave him to me. We can only win if we destroy the bomb. Go now." Katsuki was far from stupid, but he now appeared irritated, detesting the self-confidence that Izuku possessed. Kaminari nodded and started to run, but as he turned around, he heard another explosion and saw Katsuki leaping over Izuku and coming straight at him. Kaminari tried to hit Katsuki with a lightning bolt, but the explosive user blasted himself out of the way, and the bolt hit Izuku in the chest before blowing him across the hall. So, before Kaminari could finish, he was seized by the head and flung against a wall, where he struck it fairly forcefully before Katsuki kicked down on his head to guarantee a complete knockout. TCH. Damn extra. Katsuki scoffed out before turning around. He smirked as he saw Izuku stand up and punch his palm, exploding on impact. "You're next, Deku. I'm not sure why you chose to keep your quirk a secret, but it makes no difference. I will hold you accountable." Regarding his old friend's unexpected quirk, he had already reached his own conclusion. That he lied about having it because he wanted attention and believed it was some big shot. That's how his sister suddenly felt sorry for him, but Deku refused to feel the same way. Die Deku! Katsuki roared, assaulting him forcefully. However, Izuku ducked as he approached, swung his leg around, and struck Katsuki's leg, knocking him off balance. Katsuki used another blast to regain his equilibrium and move close enough to Izuku to give him a shoulder tackle. The greenette immediately rolled backwards and got back up after falling on his back. Just in time, he threw a palm into the boy's face and barely moved his head to dodge a fist. Then Izuku kicked beneath his leg, causing Katsuki to stumble until the greenette's backhand struck him. He was sufficiently pushed back to regain his footing while Izuku held his ground. I fought with Katsumi every day since the slime incident. I worked myself to build up my body as it is right now. I remembered every move you've made since we were kids, Izuku said with a fierce glare. The same look that had irritated Katsuki for so long made him growl. This time, I'll beat you. With eyes full of focused anger, Katsuki growled, You got some nerve, Deku. Izuku felt a chill run down his spine as he braced himself for what was about to happen, looking down at me. He blasted himself at Izuku, as was to be expected, but he quickly turned around and slammed his foot into the hero to be's chest. After hearing another explosion, Katsuki closed quickly and grabbed the greenette by the neck, sending him flying back. Katsuki exploded again above them, and before Izuku could react, he was slammed down on the ground with extra force. Even though the blow was extremely painful, Katsuki was still about to strike Izuku in the face with his fist. But as he swung, fragments from his explosion struck his shoulder, causing him to strike the floor instead. Quickly, Izuku grabbed Katsuki's shirt collar and gave him a headbutt. The explosive boy was pushed back enough that Izuku could kick him off, and blood exploded from his nose. Katsuki shot another explosion into Izuku's chest, and they both quickly stood up. He crashed on his back and flew across the hall from the blast alone. As he got closer to Izuku, Katsuki chuckled to himself before hearing footsteps running up behind him. He snapped around and knocked Kaminari out cold by slamming his gauntlet into his approaching form. The lighting user had fallen back after he had seized him by the hair and thrown him in Izuku's direction. With his smirk fully formed, Katsuki raised his gauntlet and touched the pin with a finger. With a furious expression on his face, Katsuki yelled, If you're so smart then you should know what this baby can do. Izuku appeared momentarily perplexed before it dawned on him. His perspiration was inside that thing, just waiting to be let out. All Might shouted, Young Bakugo! I forbid to use that support item, it may cause severe injuries or worse, but couldn't reach him. Izuku was about to move when he noticed Kaminari, his teammate, who was still unconscious and oblivious to the danger. He leapt to his feet, ran toward Kaminari, and took him by the arm before throwing him into a different hallway. Katsuki cackled and ripped the pin off just in time. Then there was fire everywhere. Observation room. The building shook and everyone could only watch in horror at the explosion. All Might was attempting to reconnect them, so their video feed was now out. As Katsumi watched the blank screen in the back of the room, she was perspiring and had a terrified expression on her face. She had been terrified of this. She doubted that her brother's unending hatred for Izuku would ever go away. He always harbored animosity toward Izuku, particularly now that he possessed a quirk, and she was aware of his sense of threat. One that would stand in his way of becoming number one and one that was committed to becoming a hero. However, it was more than that. Katsuki was unable to accept that Izuku now held power where he had previously had none. He already thought he was being looked down upon and had assumed Izuku had lied about being quirkless. Regardless of how distant that was from reality. He was furious that Izuku had a quirk that might as well have been stronger than his own, and he was now venting his rage on the greenette with the intention of beating him up. However, he simply went too far. The explosive girl stomped over to All Might and roared, What the shit are you waiting for? She shouted in his face, and the number one hero stepped back in shock. End the match already. The girl's eyes were glaring fiercely as All Might started to explain, Now young Katsumi, the timer hasn't hit 0 yet and neither team has won. Fuck that. End the match now. Before it got any worse, this had to stop. Uncertain, the students watched. Uraraka wanted it to stop right away. Iida wanted to trust their teacher, and others weren't sure what to do. All Might had put a lot of faith in Izuku's skills alone and thought he would succeed. Trust in young Midoriya and Kaminari. I'm sure they're perfectly fine. Especially now that he has power. Now please go wait with the others in. Rukido walked to the door and said, To hell with that. But All Might moved in front of him, which greatly irritated the transforming student. Move out my way. All Might crossed his arms and glared down at Rukido, saying, "Young Sato, as a teacher I cannot allow a student to interrupt the match. I understand that seeing your classmates fight may be a bit much for you, but there is no reason to interfere. Now do as you're told and return with your classmates." Rukido swiftly lifted his arm and slammed down on the Omnitrix, causing the room to go green with light. Yeah. No, a humanoid moth-like creature appeared as it faded, its wings spreading out from its cloak-like form. He had blue spots on his arms and legs, claws on his hands and feet, and piercing green eyes. Big Chill. He was putting pressure on young Sato, saying, "This is no time to act like a child, young Sato. The only way that you're going down there is through me." He had no intention of permitting a match to be interrupted due to concerns. Why I still remember is because we did the same thing in my day. He was phased through by the newly changed Rukido. Holding back his blood, All Might thought, "I didn't meant literally though me." The battle zone. In the middle of a dust-filled room, Kaminari coughed and slowly stood up, waving his arm around before looking around the hallway, which was full of dust and small embers, with a large scorched mark on the surrounding walls, ceiling, and flooring. He blinked in surprise and started to see if he could find anything, but stopped when he saw a body on the ground. "Midoriya!" Kaminari exclaimed as he rushed over to his fallen teammate. The greenette was completely knocked out, his costume torn and burnt from the blast, burn marks across his chest, and was bleeding a bit from around his face. "Hey man, wake up. Crap, crap, crap. Hey Sparky, are you still alive?" As Kaminari turned to face Katsuki in shock, he asked from behind, "Hey, it looks like I need to kill you even more then." "Ignore it. The man who hurt Midoriya, really, Kaminari shouted. "All right." The user of explosives said carelessly, "Honestly, I only wished I beat him down some more. That damn nerd should have known his place from the start." "What? Are you insane?" Kaminari was shocked by his demeanor. "Does it appear that I'm interested? Well, don't bother with the small talk." With an explosion in his hand, Katsuki screamed, "I'll just beat you up until you stop moving." Frightened, Kaminari turned on his lighting, thinking, "This guy is really crazy." Katsuki attempted to strike, but was abruptly grabbed from behind and slammed into a wall. "Huh? What the devil? Stay the hell out of my way, extra," Katsuki snarled as he looked up to see Big Chill standing above him. "The exam is finished." Disregarding the ashy-haired blonde in favor of Kaminari and Midoriya, Big Chill stated, "It would be best if we get him to Recovery Girl as soon as possible. Midoriya is far too injured to continue and needs treatment right away." "He'll be all right, right?" This made Kaminari very unhappy because Izuku had essentially prevented his death. "He'll be fine. You're being spoken to, moth fucker." Katsuki was now back on his feet and now popping explosions in his hands. He was ignored once again, finally triggering him to start charging at them. "Don't fucking ignore me." The Mothman was encased in a body of ice, so when he lunged at him, he went straight through him, hitting the ground frozen solid, still conscious but unable to move, even his quirk useless now that he couldn't sweat out what he needed to even get a spark. Did he lose? Kamiari was stunned and then blinded by a flash, saying, "Whoa, dude." XLR8 stood motionless, taking Izuku over his shoulder as he looked at Rukido. "I'm sorry, but Izuku urgently needs Recovery Girl." Kaminari could only nod before turning to face the frozen Katsuki and shivering as XLR8 hurriedly said this before sped off with the greenette in hand. That was something he didn't want to mess with. The Recovery Girl's office at UA University. Exhaustion hit Izuku like a semi-truck, and he moaned as he arrived. He opened his eyes, blinked slowly in bewilderment, and then recalled the explosion. Sitting up straight, he looked around to see where he was, and the youthful heroine's face was in front of him. The Recovery Girl smiled, albeit strangely, and said, "Hello dearie, it's good to see you awake. Oh, how I wish you were more careful. I'll make sure to reprimand All Might for failing to intervene when he ought to have." What took place? After the explosion, he had no recollection. "Thank you. You were the victim of that irate, blonde boy using his support item." Izuku flinched, but Recovery Girl said, "You're lucky that you didn't get any severe burns. Or at least more than you seem to have." She didn't miss that, but she decided to ignore it for the time being. "Your right arm and most of your ribs were broken, and some debris had also hit you. Your left cheek now has a scar, but it's not that bad." He felt the newly formed scar running down his face as he reached up to touch it. "You're lucky that one of your classmates, I think it was Sato, did something." He could only nod as he sat up and started to get out of bed. Remember to get some rest when you get to the dormitory and please, try not to come back here anytime soon, the recovery girl said, adding that he and a few of the others should be waiting outside. I'll do my best. Izuku managed to stand up and said, thank you. The nurse could only sigh as she watched him walk to the door, feeling as though they would be seeing each other frequently. Izuku opened the door, and almost every student in his class leapt out of their seats at once. Midoriya. Oh no! Izuku exclaimed as he took a step back, however before he could fall on his back, he was caught by his arm and lifted up by Katsumi. Sumi ouch. He was unable to stop himself as he was roughly lifted up by the collar of his shirt and back on his feet after she slapped him over the head. You fucking lucky that we have recovery girl, she said. With a nervous laugh, Izuku said, I know. Sanbakugo. Would you please not treat Midoriya like this? He still needs to rest, Iida reprimanded. How are you, Midoriya? As soon as I heard the building tremble, I descended. Uraraka spoke in concern. He felt compelled to suppress the tears that threatened to spill out as the class, one by one, expressed their concern for the Greenette, but Kaminari stepped forward and bowed his head abruptly. I apologize, Midoriya. I should have moved aside when I had the opportunity, Kaminari yelled, and the Greenette initially looked perplexed before continuing. You might have avoided Bakugo's blast. That's right. It's all right, Kaminari. Furthermore, it was our first actual combat match, so it's not like we were going to be flawless with it. He doesn't know. Restraint, Izuku said slowly. We simply need to perform better the next time. Are you some sort of sunshine child? What? Never mind, I appreciate your forgiveness, man. Kaminari put an arm around Izuku's neck and essentially cheered, saying, but don't worry about next time. I'll shock that flaming pile of dog shit into waking up. Izuku laughed nervously and thought, Bakugo is being insulted. UA is a different experience. Then he remembered something, or rather, someone. Where is Bakugo anyway? Office of the Principal with all might. Rukido stated bluntly, I hope he gets expelled for that bullshit. Hey, Sato-san. Izuku froze, but Momo and Iida responded. Calm down. Despite my strong desire for them to expel him, I doubt they will. The best punishment for him will be detention and, ideally, anger management classes because the match was in effect. Rukido crossed his arms and said, he obviously needs them. The transforming student appeared annoyed as he said this, lacking a suitable response. At least he didn't do any serious damage, he added. Izuku bowed and remarked, that reminds me, thank you for bringing me to Recovery Girl. Rukido casually said, don't mention it. Then he felt a tug on his pants and looked down to see Ship. Oh hey boy. Go. Ship. Ship. Sheep. Oh. As Ship leapt on his shoulder, Rukido said, all right, let's go. Get some rest, bye. As he vanished around the corner, Mina pouted and said, hang on and he's gone. Confused, Kaminari remarked, I wonder where he is heading. He must have a lot of reasons to depart quickly. In any case, we have no control over it. We just need to make sure Midoriya returns to the dorms to rest for the time being. To Izuku's surprise, Iida gave the order. Ha-eep. The Greenette was suddenly levitating thanks to Uraraka. He blushed in pure embarrassment as he was dragged away by both Katsumi and Kirishima. I can walk, you know. We know. As Ship chirped with excitement, Rukido smirked and closed the front gate of the university grounds, pulling out his old red and white badge from his pocket, which was now blinking a little. It's time to get to work. Office of Nezu, UA. Sitting across from All Might and Katsuki, Nezu sipped his tea. While Katsuki just appeared irritated with his arms crossed, the #1 hero appeared composed but his smile was a little forced. He was dissatisfied with what had happened after learning about it during combat training. Nevertheless, he felt compelled to let All Might speak first. All Might interrupted Nezu to say, Aizawa will be arriving shortly, but for now I want to ask if you know why you're in my office. The headmaster nodded when the #1 hero said, about combat training class today, sir. Nezu wanted him to go on, saying, good, good, now, tell me what went wrong today. With a nod from Nezu and a growl from Katsuki, All Might said, well sir, Sato had interrupted the final battle for the day, even using his powers to go through me and freeze Bakugo-san solid. Reminding him of it didn't seem to please him. And, confused, All Might questioned, and what sir? What else went wrong? Nezu asked, staring blankly at the tall hero. Nothing sir. All Might seemed to have missed nothing. Nezu sighed, glaring at the #1 hero, causing him to swallow. It seems I must explain it to you. To begin, You allowed the fight to commence after losing visual aid of the battle. Then you failed to ease your students' worries over seeing their classmates' brutality. Finally, you did not attempt to interfere when young Bakugo unleashed a rather volatile attack upon another classmate. All Might defended himself by saying, well, it was simply a fight between rivals, nothing more. Katsuki chose to speak up just as the headmaster was about to do so. Katsuki gave a firm glare and exclaimed, me and shitty Deku aren't rivals. He's a damn pebble in my way of becoming number one. Now, don't act like that, young Bakugo. I understand that your relationship with young Midoriya isn't the best, but he shouldn't have been permitted to join the UA at all. He was a worthless idiot who ought to have been aware of his position from the beginning, said Katsuki. Do you feel that way? Nezu crossed his hands and asked. No shit. If that transforming bastard hadn't intervened during the altercation, I would have continued to beat him down. With annoyance and anger evident in his tone, Katsuki let out a growl. It seems we need to have more than just a normal punishment, a voice said, and as they turned to face the doorway, they saw a glaring Aizawa. It's nice to have you in Aizawa, Nezu said. I assume you've heard everything up to this point. From now on, you will be observed while you are teaching any class at all until we are certain that you can manage it effectively, Aizawa said, glaring at All Might. I heard enough. But, quiet. Aizawa didn't want him to speak just yet. I'm putting you in detention for 2 weeks, Katsuki. Aizawa observed as Katsuki's eyes widened and then became aggressive. Don't give me any lip, she said. From now on, you will be taking management classes for your behavior to curb that ego. Since today is the first day of combat class, I won't punish you more severely. If you act out, trust me when I say that I will. For once, the user of the explosive quirk fell silent, as if he was processing this information at the moment, which was okay with Aizawa. He believed Katsuki needed to understand that UA was different from whatever high school he had attended, a place that only accepted the best and would expel anyone who went too far. If that's all, now wait. Young Sato ought to be disciplined as well, complained the grumpy teacher as All Might cut him off. He disobeyed a teacher regardless of his justification. Naturally, though, everyone is affected by this. All Might smiled as Nezu said, 5 days of detention should suffice. The last thing we need is to allow disrespect within our school. That is much less than Bakugo. I understand. With his eyes closed and a broad smile on his face, Nezu said, perhaps if a teacher had been more, what is the term? In charge of keeping an eye on their students, we wouldn't need one of them to feel the need to step in. All Might could only perspire, missing Aizawa's smile at seeing the number one hero in such a situation. I give punishment that is equal to the action, nothing more, nothing less. Is that an issue? No sir. All right. As All Might stood up rigidly and walked out the door, Nezu said simply, now you're welcome to leave. The headmaster then turned to face Katsuki with a menacing gleam in his eyes and said, now about your management lessons. This was not going to sit well with Katsuki. Exodus Industry, CEO Office, Tokyo, Japan. Toshiro Subaru took his work very seriously. As the leader of a global corporation, he had to be serious at all times, put on a front when interacting with people he didn't like, work tirelessly to secure a favorable deal for their business, and ensure that the board was satisfied with every product that was manufactured. Nevertheless, he was simultaneously content. His reasoning was that he didn't like suits and that he was in his 50s at the time. He was a solid 5 feet 10 inches, with fair skin, natural gray hair, and dull purple eyes. He typically wore a white dress shirt with black pants and shoes. His pride and joy was Exodus, which had been in existence for almost 200 years and had been passed down to the heir after their birthday arrived. Exodus was meant to ensure that humanity survived and would soon be sufficiently advanced to survive for another 100 years, and their machines had assisted in this by being able to support people in their homes and businesses, but there was a minor issue, at least to Toshiro. Heroes. Toshiro was not a fool. He knew that this was life, but they had been this way for almost 200 years, and there had only been small, inconspicuous changes that hardly affected the community. Don't get him wrong, he loved them and what they did, but they were part of the problem, just like the criminals who had the audacity to call themselves villains. Every fight they had resulted in lives being lost, people being hurt, property being damaged, entire lives being ruined, etc. He felt angry at them for putting humanity back so many years because quirks were also a part of that issue, but that would be like blaming a murder on a triggerman's weapon. They had made great strides in science, technology, and medicine because of the mutation, but nothing had changed. Nothing had changed 200 years ago. Exodus wasn't one to hold back, though. they were simply prohibited from using technology more freely. When it came to dealing with villains, their machines were prohibited from being used due to numerous laws crafted by the Hero Association and the world government. This was probably due to the fact that their machines were sufficiently equipped to handle a group of villains with ease, as well as the fear that heroes would lose their purpose when no villain would ever dare attempt to interfere with a soulless machine that would not hesitate to eliminate them. Earth would soon appreciate the existence of Exodus because without his machines, which were more than capable than any hero and could be as vicious as any villain, Toshiro would not stand by and do nothing when humanity needed to be saved from itself. More tea, sir? Yes. The CEO turned to one of his inventions, a synthoid, which his company had developed as soon as he took over, and said, "Thank you, T12." Its face was somewhat humanoid, with blue lighting around its eyes, mouth, and on top of its head. It stood a spoiled 5'10" with black metallic skin and purple inside that concealed energy in its chest. Its purpose was to help those on the streets, report crimes, and do the normal things that were permitted. Many families even brought them because they wanted their own personal caretaker for their home and themselves. Toshiro took a sip and remarked, "Perfect as usual. Now, please, give me the latest reports." As a monitor appeared in front of them with multiple files displayed, T12 said, "At once, sir. All Might staying within the country has caused a 34% decrease in crime within Japan. For a considerable amount of time, neither company property nor transportation routes have been attacked." Toshiro rolled his eyes and thought, "At least I can have armed men guarding them. What about Overhaul? What's going on with him and his friends?" The CEO, who wanted nothing more than for the Yakuza to be put out of the game, was irritated by this and said, "Unfortunately, no updates on Overhaul. He has been keeping himself withheld from the scene for a few weeks now. However, there has been interesting movement within the southern piers." It was so obvious that nothing ever happened at the piers, which made it ideal. "Oh, what have we got?" With little interest, Toshiro inquired. Several small delivery trucks have been seen entering and leaving the area, yet they carry a strange and foreign energy that isn't marked within our records. Energy? That which is absent from the database of one of the oldest businesses from the pre-Quirk generation that concentrated on development? "It was good for you to tell me about this," he said, because he felt something that he hadn't felt in a long time. Excitement. He wanted to find out what this new energy was, harness it, and if necessary, replicate it. "All I need now is..." "He'll do." "Mister? Can you please let Mimic know about this?" With a bright gleam in his eye, Toshiro said, "Tell him about the warehouse, to explore the area, to find out what this energy is, and, if necessary, to kill everyone who stands in his way. Oh, and don't forget to give him the Stinger operative that was chosen for the program." The CEO was left to turn and gaze out the window as T12 bowed and left. "At once, sir." No, he would be the one to give this world what it deserved. To him, the world didn't need to know exactly what he was willing to do for it. Ignorance was bliss for those who needed to be shielded from a greater threat, whether it be a villain or a hero. Calm. Japan, Mustafu City, access to dockyard shipping. Not all of Exodus was composed of machines. Toshiro's team also included regular humans who put in a lot of effort and used their individual talents and quirks to help Exodus achieve greater things. Apart from Toshiro, he had a number of scientists who would keep their synthoids operational while they conducted experiments within their facilities. They were, in his opinion, sufficiently innocent, at least in comparison to what he permitted. However, he had more than just scientists at the same time. He had security as well. They had their quirks, like the police, but they had been trained to be more than that. Their job was straightforward enough. They had to protect their facilities, their products, and, yes, they guarded a lot of things. Fortunately, they weren't bad at it because many villains could use their technology. They were the Stinger's operatives who worked under them. They were trained in more extreme ways and even experimented with their consent, of course. Their duties included following orders from higher-ranking officials within the company, stalking targets from the shadows, helping to convince certain people to join the company, and, if necessary, carrying out assassinations. For one Stinger, it would be the same. One such operative was Camilla Hargreave, a 5 feet 10 inches girl with pale skin who was 18 years old, with light purple hair in a loose braid and crystal blue eyes. She was currently wearing a prototype stealth uniform, which was state-of-the-art equipment straight out of Exodus R&D. The armor was a sleek full bodysuit with light protective attachments on the shoulders, knees, forearms, and chest. At her wrist were two shaped bracelets, marked with blue lights of electrical capacitors and electrical wiring that appear when activated. When activated, these bracelets would be able to shoot an electric bolt to shoot enemies, among other things to be added. The actual pieces of armor were white and could change color to blend into different environments. The suit also had an onboard medical system that could dispense painkillers and antivenoms should the need arise. Camilla gulped nervously as someone stepped in front of her after she had waited for her commanding officer for their assignment. The man standing in front of her was 6 feet 3 inches, with a hood covering most of his face, a gray ballistic vest underneath it, a pair of black gloves, and a pistol holstered on the right side of his chest with a 13-inch blade resting on his lower back. He was wearing black combat pants and steel-toed boots, and a combat belt strewn with tools that held up what appeared to be a belt cape that covered most of his legs. A single operative was to be chosen and interned under a senior agent of the company under a new initiative proposed by Mr. Subaru. Camilla was chosen from dozens of different projects that had submitted their own candidates, and she naturally had an advantage over the older, but less experienced, other participants because she was a Stinger, one of the oldest and most successful divisions in Exodus. She was not prepared for the shadow in front of her to be that senior agent. She and her siblings had a lot more freedom than other projects because she and her siblings were part of the Stinger project, and one of those freedoms was access to information about other competing projects in the Exodus database. She had decided to investigate the figure in front of her out of curiosity after hearing rumors from Exodus staff, but there was only one small issue. He was classified in every way. No background, no name, no birth date, not even a project name. Mr. Subaru gave the direct order for all of it to be classified. Exodus security had strongly advised her to stop her actions after she had attempted to search further. "I assume you've been briefed?" Carmilla was startled out of her reverie by the man's voice, which was quiet, almost soft, and had a slight British accent. She didn't expect that voice, but she promptly responded. "Yes, sir. When you're ready, I'll start." "Good," the man said, nodding. "What's your call sign?" "Sir, Camilla." "Yours?" "Imitate. We have a limited window, so let's move." Camilla nodded, let out a soft breath, and raised a face mask that covered the lower portion of her face. What a fascinating individual. 10 minutes after the fact. The procedure was nearly comically simple. It appears that a group of men and women dressed as knights were using the warehouse for arms deals. The other group, criminal members of some minor yakuza, were here for the latest shipment that the knights had brought in. There was no chance for them. They eliminated the criminals in a matter of minutes, with only 5 members of each group, for a total of 10 hostiles. Since laser weapons were still in their relatively early and experimental stages at Exodus, the knights, who possessed laser weapons of an unidentified make and model, were the main source of trouble. The Stinger then fired a taser disc from one of her gauntlets, sending the man into spasming fits as he was fried from the high voltage. Something like this would please Mr. Subaru greatly, Camilla thought as she ducked under a knight's sword swipe, turned, jumped, and roundhouse kicked the knight's head, causing the man to stumble back as his helmet turned into a makeshift bell with his head at the center. These knights had apparently missed the memo that it was especially unwise to wear full metal armor when facing someone who primarily used an electrical weapon. The remaining knights were trying to fight him, but it wasn't even a fair fight, so Camilla looked over to her commanding officer and almost laughed. She quickly took a pistol from one of the dead Yakuza members and aimed at one of the remaining knights. Bang! The knight clutched at his neck in a fruitless attempt to halt the bleeding, but his weapon clattered to the ground as he choked. Mimic ignored the man who was now dying. One of the 2 knights who departed had armor more ornate than the other 4 in his group. When the lower-ranking knight and his commander tried to rush him, the lower-ranking knight arrived first, blade ready for an overhead blow. But Mimic stopped him cold, his right hand choking the knight's neck and his left hand catching the falling sword handle, then lifting the knight over his head and slamming him to the ground behind him. Wheezing as he flew back, the knight commander attempted to crawl towards one of the weapons that had spilled out in the struggle, but the Shadow's leg lashed out into his gut as he tried to take advantage of Mimic's turn back. Bang! She threw her borrowed pistol aside, turned away to tend to any remaining stragglers, and rolled her eyes at the knight as a bullet pierced through the hand reaching for the laser weapon, causing the man to yell in pain as he cradled his mangled hand and attempted to back away again. As Mimic started to approach him, the knight commander glared defiantly, but then he saw one of his fallen knights slowly rise up behind the Shadow, and a few inches away, the knight lunged forward, sweeping his blade towards Mimic's neck. The knight commander smiled as his subordinate's blade approached, prepared to cleave the monstrosity before him. Almost as if possessed, the agent's body followed the Shadow's left arm as it suddenly jerked around and slammed into a backfist. Crack! The armor of the Eternal Knight, composed of layers of protection and sturdy metals, crumpled like a tin can. The commander paled as he stared numbly at his mangled subordinate, the casual ease with which the night had been turned into a bloody mess sickening the man. The helmet shrieked with tearing metal, and the laws of physics followed suit as the force of the strike sent the knight careening into the warehouse wall. If the knight wasn't already dead from having his skull crushed by his own helmet, he certainly was now judging by the force from that hit. Mimic flexed his arm and pulled it back in front of him, looking curiously at the limb. That wasn't what he had done. The shadow quickly forced it from his thoughts. First, mission. Mimic's boot struck the side of the Knight Commander's head before he could make a plea. Clean the security mechanisms. After giving it some thought, the shadow gave the order, we were never here. The Stinger nodded and started to hide the operation by moving out of sight. Changing the memories of this many people was going to be a pain. Later, Mimic, who had a quirk that was both extremely useful and extremely sensitive, grunted as he pushed the final Forever Knight into place. He needed to make contact with the target's head in order to manipulate their memories, and this required at least 10 minutes per person. As an example, the placement of the dead and unconscious bodies, the dispersed and now broken equipment these knights had brought in, and every single bloody bullet had to be accounted for and catalogued to maintain the appearance of the fictitious battle that had just taken place. It was virtually infallible. He could not look into other people's memories, only replace them with ones he made up and repress the real ones. The buyers would now blame the failed and bloody deal on their dead leader who had brought things to that point, and the other party, in the eyes of this Knight Commander and his remaining soldiers, had become violent and wanted to take the equipment by force. Generally speaking, it would have been clean. Mimic turned around and aimed his pistol at a figure emerging into the light as he was about to rejoin Camilla when he heard the slightest sound of someone dropping down behind him. He was taller, muscular, green, pale-skinned, and had a distinct jawline. He was a humanoid frog-like creature with 3-fingered hands and 2-toed feet, wearing black sunglasses, a black, sleeveless bodysuit with a green stripe down the middle, black gloves without fingers, black boots without toes with green cuffs above them, and a green belt with a white buckle. Hi. Do you know where I can locate trash cans that walk? Mimic instantly went on guard as the frog spoke. Identity yourself. Me? With his arms crossed and a cool smirk on his face, the frog said, I won't lie to you, buddy, you look suspicious. The name is Bullfrag, and that's all you're getting out of me, buddy. Would you mind sharing your knowledge with me? Bullfrag frowned and said, come on buddy, don't make this hard on yourself. Mimic raised his pistol and shot the humanoid frog, who had leapt up and was coming at him. Bullfrag continued to fire at Mimic until a long tongue slapped the weapon out of his hands. Bullfrag was still in the air when he started to drop down at the assassin, who jumped back and threw a knife. Bullfrag smirked, caught the knife, threw it to the ground, and then lunged at Mimic. With no other option, the assassin had to engage the frog in close combat. Mimic raised his arm to block a blow, then swiftly swung around and slammed his leg into Bullfrag's back. Observing that Bullfrag had been knocked down, he snatched the knife from the ground and leapt back as the frog stood up again. He stepped back and swung the knife at the frog's neck, missing. Bullfrag caught his arm and threw him into some crates, and Mimic missed again when he jabbed it at him. He pulled himself out of the wreckage and looked up just in time to be kicked back and through the remains. Flipping back on his feet, Mimic blocked a punch from Bullfrag, then shifted around and slammed his elbow into the frog's chest before forcing an uppercut to meet Bullfrag's face, which sent the frog off his feet and into the crate remains. Bullfrag moaned as he started to stand up, but he saw a grenade flying at him. Aren't you taking it personally? Bullfrag declared as he used his tongue to catch the grenade and toss it out the window. A bright flash came right from the window and the ground rumbled as the frog jumped back on his feet and saw Mimic with a lancer in hand. Hey buddy, you don't want to use that. Instead of answering, Mimic shot. Whoa! Bullfrag barely avoided it by ducking down as the beam hit the side of a truck and blasted it over. Soon enough Mimic was firing at him, making the frog jump around to avoid the incoming blasts. Buddy, will ya stop shooting at me? Before realizing that the frog was getting close, the assassin continued to fire, and Mimic, who was backstepping for distance, continued to fire at Bullfrag, who was barely able to avoid the beams. When the frog tried to grab Mimic, the assassin shifted and slammed the lancer into his back, hitting the wall and barely catching himself before turning around just in time to catch the lancer's butt. The two were now trying to outmaneuver each other before the frog kicked the weapon out of the assassin's hands, but Mimic moved quickly and slammed a haymaker into the frog with all of his left arm. In an instant, Bullfrag was flying out in front of the warehouse and through the wall. Bullfrag registered the pain and thought, okay. That one hurt. Meanwhile, Mimic had grabbed the lancer and was heading outside to confront the frog, who blasted him without hesitation. Bullfrag was blasted back again, this time into a truck, and Mimic was about to shoot again when one of the pickup trucks pulled up in front of him. The window rolled down, and Camilla appeared. "Are you done with your new friend yet?" The assassin's response was, "He's not done. However, we are." Mimic hesitated before nodding in agreement with Camilla's assessment. "Get in. We have to get what we have back to base." Mimic jumped into the back, adjusted himself into the seat, and pointed at the truck. "Dealers are dealt with and we have their cargo of weapons, not to mention the police will be coming soon as well," Camilla said quickly. "Just in case." The Stinger left the scene right away, making sure to leave the area as soon as possible. Returning to the warehouse, Bullfrag emerged from the truck, groaning as he held his chest, forcing himself to stand up straight and croaking as he noted that there was no overly skilled, 6 feet 3 inches random guy attempting to kill him. The frog sighed and reached up to his collar, opening the metal band to reveal the Omnitrix. "Bullfrag to HQ. Dealers have been caught, but an unknown was able to make off with the supplies. If I see that guy again, I'm not using Bullfrag." "Are you able to pursue them?" "Not possible. From here, I can hear the authorities." As he surveyed the mess, Bullfrag remarked, "By the way, Forever Knights were here as well. Gotta get who I can back to HQ for lockup." "The Crusaders? It's unbelievable that they're still in operation. Have you taken care of the evidence?" Before striking the Omnitrix and changing into XLR-8, the frog croaked, "I'm working on it." After a few minutes, the police arrived at the scene and were perplexed. Everything was as clean as a warehouse could be, with no indications of a fight or so-called gunfire. Needless to say, they thought this was a waste of time. "Strange. Packing garage, Exodus," a scientist with a lancer said. I have no idea what this is." Mimic and Camilla returned quickly, surrounded by interested scientists who wanted to know more about the new technology that had been brought in. "I assume that's a positive thing?" Toshiro smiled as he asked. "You're clueless, sir. This is simply amazing," the scientist remarked as he started to take a closer look at the weapon. "We need to look at this power core as soon as possible." It was light and had a simple appearance, but the power it displayed was just amazing. Finding its source or at least reproducing its energy might be feasible. "I should hope so. Have the shipment delivered to our labs by the proto-droids." As the scientist nodded, the CEO said, "I want these weapons studied for further development. Now I must speak with my agents. I'll spend a little time in the labs with you." "Of course, sir." After merely nodding and leaving his men to their work, Toshiro turned serious and walked up to Camellia and Mimic, who were both standing erect, saying, "Now, tell me everything." And all of it was said. Dorms in UA. In the meantime, Rukido was heard entering the quiet dorm house, exhausted and weary. He walked quietly into his room, where Ship was lying on his bed, sound asleep, and laid down, setting the red badge on his counter before letting sleep take over him for another night.
I will continue the story next part. Till then, bye bye.